Imagine watching the man you've loved for 13 years get down on one knee for someone else. Imagine smiling through it. Imagine clapping. Imagine saying congratulations with the same mouth that had been swallowing your real feelings since you were 27 years old. Lena Brooks didn't just imagine it. She lived it. And the worst part? She had given Asher Calloway every chance to see her, every Sunday for 13 years, and he never once looked close enough. This is the story of a joke that was never a joke, a promise disguised as laughter, and two people who almost destroyed the best thing they ever had by being too afraid to call it what it was. Drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels, and if it hits you somewhere real, hit that like button and stay with me until the end. The diner smelled like burnt coffee and old wood, which is exactly how Lena Brooks liked it. Not because burnt coffee was good, it wasn't, and she had told Ruthie, the owner, approximately 400 times over the past decade, but because that particular smell meant Sunday, and Sunday meant him. She slid into the corner booth at 8:47 in the morning, same as always, and draped her jacket over the back of the seat the way a person claims territory. Her left arm rested on the table, the sleeve of her flannel rolled up to the elbow, exposing the tail end of the dragon tattoo that curled from her shoulder blade all the way to her wrist. A customer had designed that one 6 years ago and then stiffed her on the payment. She'd kept the tattoo as a reminder that people disappoint you and you survive it anyway. Ruthie appeared without being summoned, setting down a chipped mug that said, "World's Okayest Employee" on the side. A joke gift that had been in rotation at this diner for so long, no one remembered who gave it. "He called," Ruthie said, not as a question. "He's always late the first Sunday of the month," Lena said, wrapping both hands around the mug. "Something about the building inspection reports." "I wasn't asking if he called. I was telling you he called." Ruthie set down a small pitcher of cream that Lena never used. Force of habit on both their parts. "He sounded like himself." "What does that mean?" "Happy," Ruthie said. "Distracted. The way men sound when something is happening that they haven't told anyone yet." Lena looked up. Ruthie just shrugged with the particular eloquence of a 73-year-old woman who had been watching people fall in love and miss each other across her tables for 40 years and walked back toward the kitchen. Outside, it was the kind of November morning that couldn't make up its mind. Half overcast, a sliver of pale sun cutting through the gap between two apartment buildings across the street. The sidewalk still wet from a rain that had come and gone at 4 in the morning. Lena had been awake at 4 in the morning. She'd been awake because she was finishing a sleeve piece on a client who worked nights and could only come in after midnight, and also because she hadn't been sleeping well for about 6 weeks. 6 weeks was approximately how long ago Asher had mentioned, very casually, that he was seeing someone. She heard the door before she saw him. The little brass bell above the entrance had a specific tone, not a cheerful jingle, but a single flat note, like a small complaint, and she had learned to distinguish Asher's entry from every other customer's by the particular rhythm of it. He pushed doors with his shoulder when he was distracted. He used his hand when he was paying attention. Shoulder, today. He was wearing the gray coat she hated, not because it was ugly, it wasn't. It was actually a very good coat, charcoal cashmere that some personal shopper had probably picked out, but because it made him look like a person from a different world than hers, which, to be fair, he was. But she didn't always need the reminder walking through the door first thing on a Sunday morning. "You're late," she said. "By 4 minutes." He dropped into the seat across from her, unwound the scarf from his neck, and flagged Ruthie down without looking. He had the unconscious ease of someone who had spent their entire adult life being attended to. Not arrogance exactly, more like the body language of a man who simply expected things to work and was rarely surprised when they did. There was a situation with the building on 8th. Apparently the fire suppression system in the east stairwell. I don't care about the fire suppression system. You never care about the fire suppression system. I care about you being on time. He smiled at that. It was a small smile, the kind that started in one corner of his mouth and took a moment to reach the rest of his face, and it was the exact smile that had been quietly destroying Lena Brooks since she was 27 years old and didn't know better than to notice it. Asher Calloway was 32, which meant Lena was 30, which meant they had known each other for 13 years and spent approximately 676 Sunday mornings in this booth, and she still wasn't immune to that smile. She had tried being immune to it. It didn't take. "How's the studio?" he asked. "Surviving." That's not an answer. It's an honest answer. She turned her mug in circles on the table. "I had to move the appointment schedule around this week because the radiator in the back room is making a sound like someone trapped a bird in it. My landlord says it's not an emergency. My landlord has clearly never tried to tattoo someone's spine while a radiator screams." Asher's jaw tightened slightly. A nearly imperceptible thing, just a small movement in the muscle below his ear, and she knew what was coming. "Don't," she said. "I didn't say anything. You were about to offer to fix it. I was about to ask if you wanted me to have someone look at it. Same thing. Don't." She met his eyes across the table. Brown, tired, and caring more than he would ever actually put into words. He had eyes like that, the kind that looked like they had cataloged more loss than the rest of his face admitted to. "I'll handle it. You always say that. And I always do." He let it go, which was something she had always valued about him, and which had also cost her a great deal, because if he had pushed a little harder on any number of things over the past 13 years, maybe they would have had a different kind of conversation long before now. Ruthie brought his coffee, black, no ceremony, and a plate of wheat toast that he hadn't ordered and would eat anyway. They settled into the comfortable silence that had taken years to build. It wasn't an empty silence. It was the kind of silence two people share when they have been through enough together that the absence of words doesn't feel like something missing. Outside, a cab honked. Someone's terrier barked at a pigeon and lost. The diner filled slowly around them, the Sunday regulars claiming their usual spots with the quiet authority of people who had nowhere pressing to be. "I have something to tell you," Asher said. He said it to his coffee cup. Lena noticed that. She had known something was coming since Ruthie's comment about how he sounded on the phone, but knowing something is coming and being ready for it are entirely different sports. She wrapped both hands around her mug and watched him not quite look at her, and felt the specific dread of someone who has been dreading a specific thing for 6 weeks and is now apparently about to have that specific thing arrive. "Okay," she said, carefully. "Her name is Diana." He said it like he was testing the words. "Diana Hartwell. She works in finance, not investment banking, more like private equity management. She's good, Lena. She's genuinely a good person." "I know, you mentioned her." "I mentioned she existed. I didn't—" He stopped. Set the toast down. "I'm going to ask her to marry me." The diner kept being a diner. The coffee kept being burnt. The brass bell over the door complained flatly as someone walked in off the wet street, and across the room a child knocked a glass of orange juice onto the floor, and Ruthie appeared from nowhere with a mop and the resigned efficiency of a woman who had been cleaning up other people's messes for 40 years. Lena heard all of it very clearly, because when something detonates inside your chest, the rest of the world doesn't have the decency to pause for it. "Wow," she said. "Good. That was a word. That was a normal word." When did this happen?" "We've been together 4 months." 4 months, and she kept her voice even. She was very good at keeping her voice even. She'd had 13 years of practice. "That's fast." "I know how it sounds." "How does it sound?" He looked at her then. "It sounds fast. But Mia loves her." He paused. "My daughter loving someone isn't something I take lightly." And there it was. Asher's daughter Mia, who was 7 years old and had her father's eyes and her late mother's serious expression, who called Lena the drawing lady because Lena always brought sketch paper to their Sunday visits, and drew whatever Mia requested, which was usually horses or dragons, or horses that were also dragons. If Mia loved her, there was no argument to make. There had never been an argument to make. That was the brutal truth of it. Asher's love for his daughter was not a flaw or a weakness. It was actually one of the things that made him who he was. But it had, without either of them ever planning it, become a kind of wall around him. One that Lena had stood on the outside of for 13 years, pressing her palm flat against the stone and pretending she was just resting. "Then she must be great," Lena said. "You'll like her." "I'm sure I will." "Lena." "Asher, I'm being serious. I'm happy for you. She found a version of her smile, the version she kept for client consultations and difficult conversations and Sunday mornings that required her to function like a person who had not just been handed a live grenade across a diner table. You deserve someone. You've been alone too long. So have you. We're not talking about me. We could be. We're not. She picked up her coffee. When are you planning to ask her? He looked like he wanted to say something else. He looked like a man standing at a door he had chosen not to open, and she knew that look, had been watching him choose not to open that particular door for most of a decade. And the worst thing, the thing that genuinely made her want to walk out of the diner and not come back for a very long time, was that she still didn't know if the door had ever even been there, or if she had built it herself, out of hope, and stared at it until it seemed real. Christmas, he said. I was thinking Christmas. Very romantic. She said it without any edge because she was, in this particular skill, a professional. She'll love that. Here's what Lena knew about Asher Calloway that the rest of the world didn't. He couldn't eat eggs after noon. He had a specific, irrational fear of escalators that he disguised as a preference for stairs. When he was genuinely worried about something, he went very quiet and very still in a way that people who didn't know him mistook for composure, and people who knew him recognized as the eye of a storm. He had cried exactly once in front of her, sitting in this same booth in the year after his wife Claire died, at 2 a.m. after Ruthie let them stay past closing because she could see what was happening. And he had apologized for it afterward, and Lena had wanted to shake him because you don't apologize for grief to someone who loves you, except she wasn't allowed to say that part. Claire Calloway had died 4 years into their marriage when Mia was 11 months old. An aneurysm. Sudden. No warning. The kind of thing that arrives before anyone can form a plan against it. Lena had been 25 when she got the call. She had driven 40 minutes to the hospital in a car whose gas gauge was hovering near empty, and she had sat in the family waiting room for 6 hours, and then she had taken Asher home and stayed in his guest room for a week, because there was no one else, and she was not leaving. That week had cost her something. Not in resentment. She had never once resented being there, would have made the same choice every time. But it had done a particular thing to her feelings that she couldn't undo. You cannot sit across from a man while he learns how to become a father without a partner, watch him figure out how to hold a baby at 3 a.m. with shaking hands and terror written all over his face, and keep your feelings at a manageable distance. It's simply not possible. She had fallen in love with him in that hospital waiting room. Or rather, she had recognized that she'd already been in love with him for years and had simply been calling it something else. And then she had spent the next 8 years deciding, every single Sunday, that she would not tell him. Partly because of Mia. Partly because she was afraid. Partly because the thing they had together was the most consistent, solid, honest thing in her life, and she would rather have it incomplete than risk it disappearing entirely. Partly because she had built a whole ritual around not telling him, and the ritual had calcified into identity, and she didn't know who she was without the particular shape of this longing. Wosu. Back at her studio that afternoon, she switched on the lights over her workstation and stood for a long moment looking at nothing in particular. The studio was small, 2 chairs, a rolling cart of inks arranged by color family, the walls covered in her flash art, and a few framed prints from illustrators she admired. It smelled like antiseptic and stencil paper, and, faintly, the jasmine candle she burned when she needed to think. She burned it too often. She went through about 3 a month. She lit one now and sat in her own chair and looked at her hands. Tattoo artist hands are not glamorous. Hers had a small scar on the right index finger from an X-Acto knife incident in art school, ink permanently stained into the creases of her knuckles, no matter how thoroughly she washed them, calluses in specific places from the grip of the machine. They were working hands. She had always been proud of that. She built things. She put permanent marks on people who wanted to carry something with them forever. There was something in that she found genuinely meaningful, even on the days when the radiator was screaming and the rent was due, and she wondered if stubbornness was just another word for failing slowly. Her phone buzzed. A text from Asher. You okay? She stared at it for a long moment. Fine, she typed back. Happy for you. Mean it. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Okay, he wrote. Sunday? Sunday. she confirmed. She put the phone face down on the counter and looked at her hands again and thought, 13 years. 13 years of Sundays. 13 years of burnt coffee and Ruthie's knowing looks and that same joke, the same words she said every single week like she was sneaking the truth into something that sounded like nothing. You're not allowed to date anyone else. She had started saying it when they were 19, 2 years into a friendship that had started in the waiting room of a mutual friend's apartment when they'd both shown up for a party that turned out to be the wrong night. They'd ended up getting mediocre takeout at a nearby place and talking until the restaurant closed, and she had thought, even then, even at 19, which is far too young to know anything but old enough to feel everything, this is someone who matters. The joke had started as deflection. She'd said it the first time Asher mentioned he was seeing someone, a girl named Rachel from his business program, and she'd meant it as a joke, as a thing friends say to be playful, but it had come out with a weight underneath it that she hadn't expected, and so she had committed to the joke completely, turned it into a bit, made it a tradition, made it funny and light and repeatable, and she had used it as a place to put the truth for 13 years. Every time she said it, he laughed, and every time he laughed, something in her chest did a complicated thing that she had never found the correct word for. Marcus Webb arrived at her studio at 6 that evening without an appointment, which was technically against her policy, and which she allowed anyway because Marcus was her oldest friend outside of Asher, and because he had the particular skill of arriving when she needed someone. "Heard from Cassie that something happened," he said, dropping into the client chair and making himself comfortable in the way of someone who had spent years in that chair, getting increasingly elaborate tattoos. His most recent was an octopus that covered most of his left arm, which she had spent 12 hours on over 3 sessions. What did he do? He didn't do anything. She was cleaning equipment she had already cleaned because she needed something to do with her hands. "He's getting engaged." Marcus said nothing for a moment. "To Diana," she added. "Diana." He tested the name. "You've met her?" "No." "But you know she exists." "Since 6 weeks ago." "Right." He leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. Marcus was 34, broad-shouldered, and had the face of someone who had gone through enough of his own damage to be genuinely useful in someone else's crisis. He and Lana had been friends since art school, which had also been where she'd learned about the X-Acto knife. "Lena, you have to tell him." "Tell him what?" "You know what. He's about to propose to someone." "So you're going to wait until after the wedding? The honeymoon? You'll show up at their 50th anniversary and say, 'Actually, funny story.'" "Marcus, I'm serious." He was. His voice had dropped to the register it went to when the joke was over. "You've been carrying this thing for 13 years. That's not noble. It's just painful, and you deserve better than painful." She kept her eyes on the ultrasonic cleaner and didn't answer. "What's the worst thing that happens?" he pressed. "I lose him." "You're losing him anyway." He said it gently, which made it worse. "He's marrying someone else. At least if you tell him, you'll know. You won't spend the next decade watching him build a life with someone else and wondering. I've already spent a decade watching him not build a life with me. That's different. That's you choosing silence. That's you making the decision for both of you." He stood up. "I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just saying that the version of you who talks yourself out of this one more time, I don't know what she looks like, and I've been knowing you for 11 years. He left 30 minutes later, after she'd made tea and they'd talked about other things. His new gallery show, her client waitlist, the mutual acquaintance who had recently and dramatically imploded their own life in a way that gave everyone else something to discuss. Normal things. The texture of a normal friendship. After he left, she sat in the quiet studio and burned through the rest of the jasmine candle and thought about what he said. "You're losing him anyway." 6 weeks before Asher's announcement, Lena had been at a birthday dinner for a friend of a friend, the kind of social event she attended approximately twice a year out of obligation and a desire to appear like someone who did normal things. She'd been at a table corner with a glass of mediocre wine when she'd found herself talking to a woman in her early 40s named Priya, who had the easy confidence of someone who had recently made a decision that cost her something and came out the other side. "I almost didn't marry my husband," Priya said out of nowhere. The way people at parties sometimes confess things to strangers that they wouldn't say to people who knew them. We were best friends, absolute idiots about it for 4 years. My therapist finally said to me, she said, "You're treating the relationship you want like it's something you have to protect from him, when he's the person you'd protect it with." Lena had thought about that conversation for 6 weeks. She thought about it again now, in the dark studio, with the candle burned down to nothing, protecting it from him. That was exactly what she'd been doing. She'd been treating her love for Asher like something fragile that would break if he touched it. She'd been so afraid of losing what they had that she had never once let herself imagine what it would be to gain something more. And now he was going to marry Diana Hartwell, and the thing Lena had been so careful to protect was going to be rearranged whether she said anything or not. Sunday mornings would change. They had to. You don't marry someone and keep the same arrangement you had before. The booth would still be there. But the thing that happened inside it, the unspoken thing, the tender, unacknowledged weight of it, would be different. She knew this. She had known it since he told her. She just hadn't been willing to say it out loud. 3 Sundays passed. Lena went to them. She sat across from Asher and drank coffee and talked about his building projects and her studio and Mia's school play and the radiator that she had, in fact, gotten fixed herself by calling a plumber and paying for it in installments, because that was what you did when you were a small business owner who didn't take money from friends, even friends who could easily afford to give it. She told the same joke at the end every week when he was putting his coat back on. "You're not allowed to date anyone else." He laughed. He always laughed. She laughed too because 13 years of practice makes you very good at laughing in the right places. On the 3rd Sunday, Diana came up in conversation because Asher mentioned that Mia had started asking about when Diana would move in. And his face did something while he talked about it, a complicated mixture of tenderness and apprehension. And Lena looked at that face and thought, he is genuinely considering a future, and that future is real, and it does not include you in the way you need it to. "She sounds wonderful," Lena said when he'd finished. "She is." He paused. "You should meet her. I've been wanting you to meet her. She actually asked about you." "What did she ask?" He hesitated, a fraction of a second, but she caught it. "She asked how we met, how long we'd been friends, that kind of thing." "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That you're my oldest friend. That you've been there through everything." He looked out the window. "She said it sounded like I talked about you a lot." Lena's heart did something technical and unhelpful. "Do you?" "Apparently." He turned back. His expression was difficult to read, which was unusual. She was generally very good at reading him. "She's not jealous." She was clear about that. She just wanted to understand. "Understand what?" "What we are." He said it plainly. "I told her we're friends. That we've always been friends." "What we are." Lena looked at her coffee. "That's what we are," she agreed. And she took that particular moment, and she picked it up, and she put it down in the same place she had been putting things for 13 years. And she got through the rest of that Sunday by the same method she had always used, which was the method of simply deciding not to fall apart until she was somewhere private. It was Ruthie who said something in the end, not on a Sunday, on a Thursday, when Lena stopped in before her first appointment because she was out of coffee at home and the studio's coffee maker had decided to join the radiator in its rebellion against functionality. Ruthie was alone in the pre-opening quiet, setting out sugar dispensers and the little paper placemats with the crossword on the back that no one ever finished. "You look tired," Ruthie said, which was her version of "I'm concerned." "I am tired." Lena poured her own coffee from the carafe on the counter, the way she did in the years when she had a key to this place and used to come in early on Sundays to help Ruthie set up, before Ruthie hired 2 part-time staff and the help became unnecessary. "He called again this week," Ruthie said. "He asked if you'd seemed okay lately." Lena stopped pouring. "He asked about me?" "Said you'd seemed quiet the last few Sundays." Ruthie straightened a salt shaker. "I told him people are quiet when they have things on their minds." "Ruthie." "I didn't say anything else." She looked up. Her eyes were brown and direct and had a specific quality that Lena associated with people who had survived enough to stop being afraid of the truth. "But I'll say something to you. I've watched you two for a long time, Lena, longer than you've been coming here together. I watched you walk through that door separately before you started walking through it at the same time, and I've watched what happens at that table every Sunday, And I'm going to tell you something you already know. Ruthie, he's not a stupid man. He's a frightened one. She went back to the placemats. There's a difference. Stupid men don't see. Frightened men see and look away. She paused. The question is what you're going to do about it. He's going to propose to someone. I know. I can't. I didn't say you could. I said, what are you going to do about it? Ruthie looked at her again. That's a different question. Lena took her coffee and stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at the corner booth. Their corner booth, which wasn't theirs. It was a booth in a diner, available to anyone, not reserved or named or imbued with any particular magic except the magic of repetition, of showing up, of two people choosing, week after week, to be in the same place at the same time. She thought about what it would mean to stay quiet, to go to the engagement party that Asher would eventually throw, and meet Diana, who was apparently wonderful, and smile, and watch him put a ring on someone else's hand. She thought about the Sunday mornings after. Fewer, probably, because married life rearranges priorities, and Diana would want weekends, and Mia would want family time, and the booth would still be there, but the ritual would soften into something more occasional, and eventually she would be the old friend he had coffee with 3 or 4 times a year, and she would have done that to herself. She thought about what Marcus had said. You're losing him anyway. She thought about what Priya had said at that party 4 months ago. You're treating the relationship you want like it's something you have to protect from him. She thought about the joke. You're not allowed to date anyone else. 13 years. 676 Sundays, give or take. The same words delivered with a laugh, carrying a weight she had never let him feel. She finished her coffee standing in the doorway of an empty diner at 7:30 in the morning and made a decision that terrified her. Not a dramatic decision, not yet, but the small internal, hinge-turning decision that happens before the dramatic one. The decision to stop protecting the feeling from the person it belonged to. She would tell him. She didn't know when. She didn't know how. She had no script and no strategy and approximately zero confidence that it would go well. But she had spent 13 years choosing silence, and silence had not saved her anything. It had only deferred the cost. She set her empty cup on the counter, said thanks, Ruthie, in a voice that came out steadier than she felt, and walked out into the November morning. Behind her, Ruthie watched her go with the expression of someone who has been patient for a very long time and has begun to suspect that patience, finally, is about to be rewarded. The 4th Sunday after the announcement, Asher arrived on time. He used his hand on the door, not his shoulder, which meant he was paying attention. He sat down and looked at her across the table, and there was something different in how he was looking. Not different like something had changed, but different like something that had always been there was closer to the surface than usual. She didn't know what to do with that, so she did what she always did, which was look back at him steadily and wait. You've been quiet, he said. You've been talking to Ruthie. I've been noticing. He wrapped his hands around his own mug. His hands were the opposite of hers. Smoother, less scarred, though they'd built things too, just in a different way. He had built a company from a real estate inheritance that his father had run into the ground, had spent 6 years rebuilding it into something legitimate and sustainable, had done it largely through the particular combination of stubbornness and meticulous attention to detail that he brought to everything he cared about. You've been quieter since I told you about Diana. I'm not, Lena. I know you. You do this thing where you go quiet and give people exactly enough conversation to not worry about you, and you think no one notices, but I notice. He paused. I always notice. She looked at him. The diner was doing its Sunday thing around them. The booth across from them occupied by a father reading the paper while his 2 small kids drew on the crossword placemats with crayons. The corner table with the older couple who came every week and never talked much and seemed perfectly content not to. The counter where 2 construction workers were eating eggs and debating something with low, earnest voices. Tell me something true, Asher said quietly. He had said that to her before. It was something they'd started years ago, a shortcut for moments when they'd circled something long enough. Tell me something true. Not a demand, an invitation. She looked at him, at the tired brown eyes and the gray coat she hated, and the small smile that was not smiling right now, that was doing something more careful and more searching than smiling. She thought about the booth, the coffee, the 676 Sundays, the joke that was not a joke, The door she had been standing in front of for years without opening. She thought about Ruthie saying frightened men see and look away, and Marcus saying you're losing him anyway, and Priya saying you're treating the relationship you want, like something you have to protect from him. She opened her mouth, and then his phone rang. He glanced at it, a reflex, not a choice, and his expression shifted into something practical. It's Mia's school. I have to... He was already reaching for his coat. I'm sorry, it's Saturday staff coverage for the winter thing. She's supposed to be there, and I was supposed to confirm. He stood, pulling cash from his wallet without counting it, dropping it on the table with the ease of someone who didn't have to count. I'll call you tonight. I'm sorry. It's fine, she said. And then, because she always said it, because it was the ritual and the ritual was the only thing keeping her upright right now. Hey, Asher. He paused, coat half on. You're not allowed to date anyone else. He laughed, the small laugh she knew, the one that reached the corners of his eyes. I know, he said, the way he always said it. And he was gone. Lena sat alone in the booth. She had almost said it. She had been one sentence away from 13 years of silence finally breaking open. And the phone had rung, and she was still sitting here, and the coffee was getting cold, and the father across the way was trying to wrestle a crayon away from the youngest kid who had apparently decided to eat it, and outside the November sun was doing its best and not quite succeeding. She picked up her coffee. She drank it cold. She thought, next Sunday. And then she thought, no, not next Sunday. You have been saying next Sunday for 13 years, and that is not a plan. That is a postponement, and you have postponed yourself right up to the edge of losing him. And there is no more Sunday after this one that is going to feel better than this one, or braver, or more prepared. She put the coffee down. She looked out the window at the November street, at the city doing its ordinary thing, at the pigeons and the cabs and the dog walkers, and the people who were simply going somewhere without a 13-year weight on their chest. She thought, okay. She thought, next week. She thought it the way a person thinks it when they mean it for the last time. The week after that Sunday was the longest week Lena Brooks had put herself through in recent memory, which was saying something given that her recent memory contained things like a burst pipe flooding half her studio and a tax audit that had taken 4 months to resolve, and a period in her late 20s when she had been so broke that she'd eaten peanut butter crackers for dinner 6 days out of 7 and told everyone she was on a health kick. This was worse than all of those things combined because those things had been external. They had happened to her. This was a thing she was doing to herself, voluntarily, 1 hour at a time. She worked. She tattooed. She went through her Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday with the disciplined focus of someone who has decided that the best way to not think about something is to keep her hands occupied, and she was very good at keeping her hands occupied. She did a full-sleeve consultation for a client who wanted botanical work running from his shoulder to his wrist. Lilies and fern fronds and a specific wildflower his late grandmother had grown in her garden in rural Pennsylvania, which he brought in pressed between 2 pieces of wax paper like a specimen, like something precious. She spent 2 hours making preliminary sketches, asking questions about stem width and negative space, and how much he wanted the grandmother's flower to stand out from the surrounding design. She got absorbed in it the way she always got absorbed in meaningful work, which is to say, she got absorbed until she came up for air around 9 in the evening and realized she had been kneeling over her drafting table for 4 hours and had not thought about Asher for approximately 45 minutes, which felt like a small victory. The victory lasted until she got home, when she found a voicemail from him on her phone, left at 7:30, while she'd been bent over the botanical sketches, that said, simply, "Hey, just checking in. The thing with Mia's school was nothing. Call me back when you have a chance, or don't. I'll see you Sunday." She listened to it twice. She was not proud of that, but she did it. And the second time she paid attention to the texture of his voice, the specific casual cadence of it, and she thought about what he had said the previous Sunday. I always notice. She thought about that a lot this week. She thought about what it meant that he noticed and still didn't know. Either she was a better actor than she had ever given herself credit for, or the thing she was hiding was exactly the kind of thing that is hardest to see when you're in the middle of it. She did not call him back. She texted instead. "Saw your message. All good. See you Sunday." and then felt like a coward about it for approximately 4 hours before falling asleep on her studio couch because she had been too tired to make it home. On Saturday morning, her phone rang. Not Asher this time. Her mother. Patricia Brooks called her daughter approximately twice a month from a house in Southern Virginia where she had lived for the past 11 years with a man named Gerald, who was perfectly nice and had no particular qualities that made him interesting or terrible, which Lena had decided was probably what her mother needed after the interesting and terrible marriage to Lena's father that had ended when Lena was 12. Patricia had survived the interesting and terrible and had earned the perfectly nice, and Lena genuinely respected that, even if their conversations tended to circle back to the same two topics: Lena's studio finances and Lena's romantic life. "You sound different," Patricia said, which was her opening move when she suspected something. She had learned this from 40 years of paying attention to people in the particular vigilant way of someone who has been caught off guard too many times to leave their guard down. "I'm fine, Mom." "You sound like you're thinking too loud." Lena stretched out on the studio couch, staring at the ceiling. There was a water stain up there in the corner that she had been meaning to have looked at for about 8 months. It was shaped a little like a sitting dog if you tilted your head. "Asher's getting engaged." Silence. Patricia had met Asher approximately 6 times over the course of 13 years, which was fewer times than you'd expect for someone Lena considered her closest friend, and which reflected the particular geography of their lives. Lena in the city, her mother 5 hours south, their visits concentrated into holidays and occasional long weekends that never quite aligned with Asher's schedule or Lena's or both. But Patricia knew about Asher the way mothers know about things their daughters have never directly said. She knew through the texture of how Lena talked about him, and the specific things Lena omitted, and the particular tone of voice Lena used when she said, "Oh, he's just my friend." "Oh, sweetheart," Patricia said. "Don't. I'm not doing anything. I can hear you doing something. I'm just—" Her mother paused. "How long has he been seeing her?" 4 months. She works in finance. Her name is Diana. She's apparently great with Mia." 4 months, Patricia repeated. "He's going to propose after 4 months?" "He was planning Christmas." Another pause. Longer this time. Lena could hear the particular quality of it, her mother trying to figure out what kind of support was being requested and whether to give what was being requested or what was actually needed, which are not always the same thing. "Lena," Patricia said finally, "have you ever—" "No. I haven't finished. You were going to ask if I've ever told him. The answer is no. The answer has always been no. I'm not going to." She closed her eyes. The water-stained dog was still there when she opened them. "It's too late." "Why is it too late?" "Because he's with someone. Because she's good for him. Because Mia loves her. Because—" She stopped. "Because I missed my chance. By about a decade." "You missed it because you didn't take it," her mother said, not unkindly. "That's the same thing." "It really isn't. But okay," Patricia exhaled. "What do you need from me right now?" It was a good question. One of the things Lena genuinely valued about her mother was the ability to ask that directly, without ceremony. "What do you need from me right now?" Not, "Here's what you should do." Not, "When I was your age." Just, "What do you need?" "I don't know," Lena admitted. "Okay, then I'll just sit here with you for a bit." She did. They stayed on the phone for another 40 minutes, talking about mostly nothing. Gerald's plan to build a greenhouse in the backyard, the neighbor's new dog, a recipe Patricia had tried twice and gotten wrong both times and was determined to get right. The normal texture of a mother and daughter conversation. Underneath it, running like a current, was the thing they had both acknowledged and agreed, silently, not to keep pulling at. When they hung up, Lena felt marginally better. Not fixed, just accompanied, which was sometimes all you needed to get to the next hour. She got off the couch, rolled her sleeves down, and went back to the botanical sketches. She had a job to do. She would do it. Sunday would come, and she would see Asher, and she would say what she had decided to say, or she would be too afraid to say it again, and either way she would survive it, because she had been surviving things she wasn't sure she could survive for 30 years, and her track record on that was currently perfect. The wildflower in the pressed paper was a blue-eyed Susan. She sketched it for another hour, trying to get the petals right. She got it right on the fifth try. The week moved. It did what weeks do regardless of what you want from them. On Sunday morning, she woke before her alarm, which was set for 7:15, and lay in the gray pre-light of her apartment, looking at the ceiling of a different room that did not have a water-stained dog in the corner, and she thought about the first Sunday she and Asher had come to the diner together. Not the first time they'd met, that was in the Wrong Night apartment waiting room, 13 years back, but the first time they had specifically arranged to meet at Ruthie's, which had been Asher's suggestion. They had been 20 years old. He had just finished the first brutal semester of business school, and she had just finished her first semester at art school, and they had both been exhausted and broke and mildly overwhelmed by what they had signed up for. And he had said, "There's a diner near my building, nothing special. Do you want to get breakfast?" And she had said yes without hesitating, the way she had always said yes to Asher, and she had not known, sitting in that booth for the first time with bad coffee and good conversation, that she was sitting down at a table she would return to for 13 years. You never know, at the beginning, what something is going to mean. She got up at 7, showered, put on the dark green sweater that she wore on Sundays specifically, not because she'd planned it that way, but because it had become the Sunday sweater through repetition and now felt wrong to wear on other days. She took the bus because the weather had turned genuinely cold overnight, the first real cold of the year, the kind that reaches through your coat and reminds you it has opinions. The diner was warm. It smelled like burnt coffee and old wood, and she loved it with the specific particular love of someone who has assigned meaning to a place through sustained presence. She took the corner booth. Ruthie brought the mug that said "World's Okayest Employee" without being asked. "He called again?" Lena asked. "He did not," Ruthie said. "He texted, which is new." "What did he say?" Ruthie looked at her with the precise expression of someone who was not going to repeat a private text. "He said he'd be on time today." She set down the cream pitcher. "He wasn't asking about you this time. He was just saying he'd be on time." Lena turned her mug in circles on the table and looked out the window. He was on time. Exactly on time, which was unusual enough to notice. And he used his hand on the door, and he sat down across from her without the usual process of unwinding and settling. He just sat, coat still on for a moment, like he'd arrived with something already in mind and hadn't quite decided what to do with it yet. "You look like you didn't sleep," she said. "I slept fine." He poured cream into his coffee, which he also never did. She watched it cloud the black surface and thought, something is different. "Mia asked about you this week." "What did she ask?" "She asked why you haven't come for dinner in a while." He looked up. "She's right. It's been almost 2 months. I've been busy." "You're always busy. You used to be busy and still come for dinner." He wasn't accusatory. He was careful. He was in the specific mode she recognized from years of watching him approach things he found difficult, which was the mode of a man trying to be direct without accidentally detonating something. "She misses you." Lena thought about Mia. 7 years old, those serious eyes, the horse dragon drawings on Lena's studio wall that she had framed because Mia had signed them with a capital M and a small IA and a star, the way kids sign things when they are proud of something. She thought about the first time Mia had reached up and grabbed her hand in a parking lot, the automatic, unthinking way children claim the hands of adults they trust, and how Lena had felt something shift in her chest at that, not just about Mia, but about everything, about Asher, and the life he had built, and the way she was woven into it, and the particular terrible tenderness of loving a family that was not yours. "Tell her I'll come soon," Lena said. "I will. I mean it. Come next Saturday. She has a thing. She learned to make pancakes. She's very serious about it. She's been practicing." Something softened in his face. "She wants to make them for you specifically because you're, in her words, very honest about food." Lena laughed despite herself. "She told you that." She told Diana that. The name landed in the conversation the way names do when they've become unavoidable. Diana asked who Lena was, and Mia said, "Lena is the drawing lady and she's very honest about food, and she said my pancakes last time needed more butter, and she was right." The laugh faded naturally. Lena looked at her coffee. "She sounds good. Diana?" "She is. He said it without the complicated emotion she might have expected. Simply, factually. And then, she wants to meet you. You mentioned. I mean specifically, she asked if the three of us could get coffee sometime. He paused. I told her I'd ask you. The specific cruelty of this situation was that there was nothing to object to. Diana wanting to meet Asher's oldest friend was reasonable. Diana being kind enough to ask through Asher rather than engineering some accidental meeting was considerate. Diana being, by all available evidence, a genuinely decent person was the thing that made all of this so much harder to be angry about. And Lena had tried being angry, had given it a real effort on 2 separate evenings, and had failed because anger requires a villain and this story didn't have one. Sure, Lena said. Whenever works. Lena, I said sure. I know you said sure. His voice was quiet. The quietness it went to when he was actually paying close attention. You say sure in a certain way when you're not sure. Asher, I'm not pushing. I just want you to know that I see the difference. He wrapped both hands around his mug. The heater was on somewhere under the window, and it made a low ticking sound against the morning silence. You're the most important person outside of Mia in my life. I need you to be okay. Not performing okays, actually okay. She looked at him, at the worn-in earnestness of him, the particular quality he had of meaning, what he said without any ornamentation around it, which was something she had always found both admirable and, right now, excruciating. Tell him, said something inside her, right now. He just said you're the most important person outside of his daughter. That's not nothing. Tell him what you've been sitting on for 13 years and let the conversation be what it is. I'm working on it, she said instead. He accepted that. Not happily, but he accepted it, because he was, for all of his perceptiveness, a man who had learned to respect the borders other people set, even when the borders frustrated him. He let things lie when people asked him to. It was one of his better qualities, and also, she thought, one of the things that had kept them both in this particular suspended state for so long. He didn't push. She didn't break. They circled each other week after week in a holding pattern that looked like friendship and felt like something that had no accurate name. Ruthie came by to refill the mugs. She looked at them both with the expression she had worn for years, the expression of a woman in possession of information she had chosen not to volunteer, and moved on without comment. Mia drew something for you, Asher said. He reached into his coat pocket. He was still wearing it, she realized, still not fully settled, and pulled out a folded piece of paper that had been folded approximately 11 times by small, imprecise hands. She made me promise to deliver it in person. Lena unfolded it carefully. It was a drawing in crayon, red and purple, and an aggressive shade of orange, of what appeared to be a person with long hair standing next to a very large animal that was almost certainly intended to be a dragon. The person had a big smile. The dragon had what looked like a crown. At the bottom, in block letters that Mia was clearly still working on, for Lena from Mia with a star at the end. Something pulled in her throat. She folded it back along the existing creases and held it in both hands. She's been telling everyone at school her drawing teacher is a real artist, Asher said. Her actual teacher sent me a note saying Mia's the only kid in class who draws dragons every single week and defends it as a personal brand. She has a personal brand at 7? She's Mia. She has opinions at 7. He smiled. The real one, the small one that took a moment to arrive. She told her class that all the best artists have a signature subject. She said it very seriously, apparently. Her teacher was charmed and also a little concerned. Lena pressed the drawing flat on the table with her palm. I love her, she said. Simply, without any particular weight behind it beyond the simple truth of it. I know, Asher said. She loves you too. He paused. We both do. The word landed differently than it might have on a different day. Both. We. He said it the way you say things you mean without knowing how much you mean them. With the ease of something so established it doesn't feel like a declaration. She sat with it for a moment. The particular way it felt, the particular thing it did to the morning. And she thought, if he knew. If he had any idea what that word feels like from the other side of this table. She tucked the drawing into her jacket pocket. Saturday, she said. I'll come for pancakes. He looked relieved in the specific way of a person who had been more worried than he was showing. Good. She's going to lose her mind. Tell her I'm bringing the butter. He laughed. Full, genuine, the laugh that didn't need warming up. She absorbed it the way she always did. Cataloged it. Filed it somewhere in the inventory of all the things she had been storing against some unnamed future day as evidence of what this had meant. Outside, the November cold pressed against the diner window. Inside, the heater ticked. The regulars came and went. The father with the crossword kids came in without the kids today, just himself and the paper and a coffee he nursed for 40 minutes, reading slowly, in no hurry to be anywhere. The older couple in the corner arrived and settled into their comfortable silence. Lena and Asher stayed in their booth for almost 2 hours. They talked about his company's upcoming project, a mixed-use development in a part of the city that had been neglected for 20 years, something he had been quietly working toward for a long time, something that mattered to him beyond the financial calculus of it. She asked questions and he answered them with more detail than he gave most people. Because she had always been someone he talked to like she was actually listening. She told him about the botanical sleeve, the pressed wildflower, the grandmother, the way the client had cried a little during the consultation when they'd figured out exactly how to incorporate it. Asher listened the way he listened when something was genuinely moving him, which was with a very slight stillness, the movement going out of his face in a specific way that meant he was present. That's what you do that no one talks about, he said. It's not just the art, it's you make people feel like what they're carrying is worth putting somewhere permanent. She didn't have a good answer for that. She just accepted it and kept both hands around her mug and thought about the drawing in her pocket and the word both and the way this man had been. For 13 years, the most consistent and the most difficult and the most beloved thing in her life. When he finally stood to leave, she said it. The thing she always said. Ritual, armor, truth delivered in the shape of a joke. You're not allowed to date anyone else. He was already halfway into his coat. He stopped, and then he laughed, but this time the laugh was a fraction of a second delayed, a beat off its usual tempo, and it faded faster than it normally did. He looked at her for a moment that lasted slightly longer than moments usually last. I know, he said. It was what he always said, exactly what he always said. Same words, same construction, same verbal shorthand they had used for 13 years. But the way he said it this Sunday, something in it was different. She couldn't locate the difference precisely, couldn't name it or measure it, but she felt it the way you feel a shift in pressure before weather changes, a barely perceptible alteration. He left. She watched him push through the door with his hand, not his shoulder, and step out into the cold. She sat in the booth alone for 10 more minutes, which was unusual. She normally left within a few minutes of him. Today she sat and looked out the window and watched him walk down the block until he turned the corner and was gone. And she thought about the pause before the laugh, and the way his eyes had stayed on her for that extra beat, and the particular quality of I know spoken by a man who might, for the first time, be wondering if he knows something more than he thought he did. Or she was inventing it. She was aware that was possible. She had been in love with this man for a very long time, and people in love are not reliable narrators of the behavior of the person they love. They see what they need to see. They read intention into accidents and meaning into reflexes. She had been wrong about things before, but she had also been right. She put on her coat and said goodbye to Ruthie and walked out into the cold. She had a week before Saturday, before Mia's pancakes, before she would, for the first time, exist in the same physical space as whatever Asher was building with Diana, and she would have to be a person who could do that with something resembling grace. Not performed grace, she had promised herself she was done with performance, but the real kind, the kind that costs something. She walked 3 blocks before she stopped at a corner and stood in the cold with her hands in her pockets, one hand wrapped around the folded drawing, and she made a different kind of decision than she had been making. Not, I'll tell him on Sunday, not the postponement dressed as a plan. She decided that she was going to go to his apartment on Saturday and look Diana Hartwell in the face and be as honest about what she saw as Mia said she was about food. She was going to be present for it. She was going to stop treating Asher's life like something she had to monitor from a careful distance in order to protect herself. And she was going to walk into the middle of it, the way she had walked into the middle of his grief when Claire died. because that was what it meant to love someone, even if it was the most painful thing she had done in 30 years. Even then, she would go on Saturday, she would meet Diana. She would watch Mia flip pancakes with the absolute seriousness of a 7-year-old who has been told she has a personal brand. She would bring the butter. She would be there, fully, without the armor of distance. And she would see. What she would see, she didn't know yet, but she had spent 13 years not looking directly at certain things, and that method had not served her well. She was going to look. She was going to stand in the middle of the thing and actually look at it, even the parts that hurt, and she was going to let whatever happened next happen with her eyes open. The light changed. She crossed the street. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Not the hand with the drawing, the other one. It was Marcus. How was Sunday? She typed back, interesting. He sent back a single question mark. I'm going to his apartment Saturday, she wrote. He wants me to meet her. 3 dots. Then, oh, okay. Are you sure? She thought about it for a half a block, then, no. But I'm going anyway. That's very you, Marcus wrote. She put the phone away. She walked the remaining 4 blocks to the bus stop with her hand still curled around the folded drawing in her pocket. The crayon dragon with the crown. The person with the big smile. The star at the end of Mia's name. For Lena from Mia. She was going. She was going to do the hard thing, the direct thing, the thing that required her to be fully present in a situation that had every reason to break her heart. Not because she had a plan or a strategy or any particular confidence that it would be okay, but because she had learned in 30 years that the things you avoid never actually get smaller. They just get heavier. They follow you from Sunday to Sunday, from booth to booth, from year to year, until the weight of not dealing with them becomes greater than the thing you were afraid of to begin with. She was tired of the wait. The bus came. She got on. She found a window seat and watched the city scroll past in the early Sunday afternoon gray and thought about pancakes and butter and a 7-year-old with a personal brand, and underneath all of it, the quiet, constant 13-year-old fact of loving a man who was about to marry someone else. Not underneath it, actually. She corrected herself. Not underneath. Right here at the surface, right where she could feel it, that at least was new. Saturday came the way difficult things always do, without warning, and then all at once. Lena spent Friday night telling herself she was prepared and Saturday morning proving herself wrong about that. She stood in front of her closet for 11 minutes, which was 9 minutes longer than she normally spent on this decision, and ended up in dark jeans and a rust-colored Henley that was neither impressive nor deliberately casual, just a thing she owned that fit correctly. And she decided that was probably the right choice for meeting the woman your closest friend was going to marry. You didn't dress up for it. You also didn't show up in paint-stained work clothes, which she had briefly considered as a kind of armor. This is who I am, take it or leave it, before recognizing that as the passive aggression it was, and hanging them back up. She bought butter from the corner store on her way to the subway. A full pound, the good kind, European style with the higher fat content, because Mia had been told the pancakes needed more butter and Lena was not going to show up without taking that seriously. Asher's building was in the kind of neighborhood that had been quietly expensive for 20 years and made no apologies for it. Not flashy, that wasn't Asher's style, but solid and well-maintained, the kind of place where the lobby had real marble floors and a doorman who knew the residents by name. The doorman, whose name was Terrence, and who had been at this building for 6 years, greeted Lena with recognition because she had been here enough times that her face was part of the furniture of his day. Mr. Calloway's expecting you, Terrence said. I know, she said. Thanks, Terrence. She rode the elevator to the 14th floor and stood outside apartment 1407 for approximately 30 seconds longer than necessary, looking at the door. Behind it, she could hear, faintly, the sound of Mia's voice at a high, excited pitch, and the lower register of Asher's response, and something that was probably the kitchen, the clatter of pans, the low drum of the exhaust fan. She knocked. The door opened and Mia Calloway hit her at approximately knee height, like a small, enthusiastic projectile, arms thrown around Lena's legs with the complete physical confidence of a child who has never considered that a hug might not be wanted. You came, Mia said into her jeans. I said I would. Lena crouched down to her level. Mia was 7 and serious-faced in the way of children who are paying close attention to the world, with her father's brown eyes and a gap between her front teeth from a lost tooth that hadn't been fully replaced yet. She was wearing an apron, a real one, not a child's apron, an adult one that came to her knees and was tied approximately 4 times around her small waist. "I brought the butter." Mia's eyes went to the paper bag. "Is it the good kind?" "European style." Mia nodded with the gravity of someone receiving important intelligence. "Dad said it wouldn't matter which kind, but I said it matters." She turned and walked back into the apartment with the authority of a person who has just been vindicated by evidence, and Lena stood up and followed her inside. The apartment was familiar to her in the way that places become familiar when you have spent real time in them. Not just the layout, but the specific texture of it, the particular way the light came through the kitchen window in the afternoon, the shelf in the entryway where Mia's drawings accumulated in a loose stack that Asher rotated periodically, the slight squeak in the third floorboard past the rug that she knew to step over without thinking. She had been in this apartment during the worst night of Asher's life, and on ordinary Tuesday evenings, and once during a thunderstorm that had knocked the power out for 4 hours, and they had sat on the kitchen floor with flashlights, and Mia had been 1 year old and terrified of the thunder, and they had taken turns holding her until the storm passed. This apartment held a lot of her history. Asher was in the kitchen. He was standing at the counter with a dish towel over his shoulder, and he looked up when she came in, and his expression did the small, genuine shift it did when he was actually glad to see someone. Not the polished greeting of the professional version of him, but the real, unguarded thing. "You made it," he said. "I said I would." She set the butter on the counter. "Where is she?" "She went to get her recipe." He said it without irony. "She has a recipe, written on an index card. She made me laminate it." "You laminated a 7-year-old's pancake recipe." She was very serious about it. Lena looked at the counter, the bowl of batter already mixed, the pan warming on the stove, the small stool Mia used to reach counter height. Everything carefully arranged by small hands that had been thinking about this. She felt the particular tug she always felt in this kitchen, the feeling of being inside something warm that was not entirely hers, and she set it aside the way she had learned to set things aside. "Diana couldn't make it today," Asher said. He said it neutrally, watching the pan. Something in Lena's chest did a complicated maneuver. Relief and disappointment and guilt about the relief, all arriving simultaneously. "Oh." She had a thing with her family. Her sister's in from out of town. He glanced over. "I figured I'd tell you before Mia did. Mia will absolutely tell you. She's been keeping track of every development." Is Mia upset?" "No, she's 7. She has the pancakes, she has you, she has the good butter, her priorities are clear." He paused. "She likes Diana, she's been—" He stopped again. There was something in the stopping that she noticed, the particular way he began a sentence and then seemed to check it before it fully arrived. "They've been good together. Diana is patient with her. Mia talks too much when she's nervous, and Diana she listens. She doesn't rush her." "That's a good quality," Lena said. "It is." Mia reappeared with the laminated index card held at arm's length like a document of state. She handed it to Lena for inspection. The recipe was written in pencil in large, slightly uneven letters. Flour, egg, milk, butter, a lot, salt, baking powder. At the bottom, underlined twice. "Do not rush it." Lena looked at the underlining. "Who taught you to underline?" "I decided," Mia said, "because last time I rushed, and they were wrong inside. Good on outside, wrong inside." "That happens," Lena said. "Not anymore." Mia climbed her stool, took the card back, and propped it against the backsplash with the focused energy of someone beginning a serious task. "You can watch, but don't help unless I ask." "Okay?" "Dad watches, but he doesn't help either. It's a rule." Asher met Lena's eyes over Mia's head with an expression of completely helpless affection, and Lena thought, not for the first time, "This is the thing. This is the thing that undoes me every single time. Not the Sunday mornings, not the coffee, or the conversation, or the coat she hated. This. The way he looked at his daughter, The way he had built a whole life around this small person with the laminated recipe and the personal brand and the serious eyes and the extraordinary quiet love of it. She stayed for 3 hours. Mia made 2 batches of pancakes, the first of which she deemed acceptable, and the second of which she pronounced significantly better. She ate 4 of them standing at the counter because she said sitting down would take too long. Asher ate 2 and Lena ate 3, and they all agreed that the European butter had made a measurable difference, which Mia accepted with the dignity of someone whose instincts have been confirmed. After, Mia dragged Lena to her room to show her the horse dragon series she had been developing, a narrative apparently involving a dragon named Cobalt, who was also secretly a horse on weekends and had various adventures related to this dual identity. Lena sat on the edge of Mia's bed and looked at each drawing seriously and asked questions that Mia answered with increasing animation, and for 45 minutes the world narrowed to this room with its drawings tacked to the walls and the small, serious voice explaining the ongoing complications of Cobalt's double life. When Mia eventually crashed, as 7-year-olds do, going from full speed to horizontal on her bedroom floor in approximately 3 minutes, Asher appeared in the doorway with 2 mugs of coffee and tilted his head toward the living room. They sat on the couch, the kind of sitting that had the comfortable geometry of people who had sat next to each other for years and knew how much space to take without thinking about it. Mia's art supplies were spread across the coffee table. A Cobalt drawing was in progress. He was mid-flight, with only one wing fully detailed, the other waiting to be finished. "She's something," Lena said. "She is." He looked at the unfinished drawing. "She told her teacher she wants to be a tattoo artist when she grows up. Her teacher called me." "What did you say?" "I said her godfather is a real estate developer, and her drawing teacher is a tattoo artist, and she has a personal brand, and that the teacher should probably just work with the material she has." Lena pressed her lips together to hold the laugh. "You did not say godfather. I said—" He stopped. "I said her closest family friend." The laugh came out anyway, quieter than it wanted to be. He smiled at it. They sat in the quiet for a while, which was the kind of quiet that had never been uncomfortable between them. And outside the afternoon had gone gray-blue with early winter dark, and the apartment was warm in the way of places where someone has been living and cooking and paying attention to another person's comfort. "She would have liked today," Asher said. He wasn't looking at her. "Diana, she's been asking about meeting you." "We'll figure it out," Lena said. "Lena." He turned, the careful mode again, the one she had been watching him deploy and withdraw all week. "I want to ask you something, and I want you to actually answer it. Not the answer you think I want, the real one." She looked at him. "Okay. Are you all right? Not about work, not about the studio, about all of this." He gestured vaguely, which was unusual for him. He was normally precise. "About me and Diana and—" He stopped. "I feel like something shifted between us, and I don't know if I'm reading it wrong." 14 possibilities moved through her mind in approximately 2 seconds. She could say, "Nothing shifted, you're reading it wrong." She had been saying variations of that for years. She could say, "I'm adjusting, give me time," also a long-term favorite. She could say the thing she had been not saying for 13 years, here on this couch, in this apartment that held all of her history, with his daughter asleep on the floor of the next room, surrounded by drawings of a horse that was also secretly a dragon. She looked at his face, the tired eyes, the familiar topography of him, the man she had watched become a father and rebuild a company and survive the unsurvivable, and show up every Sunday with his shoulder against the door when he was distracted and his hand when he was paying attention. And she thought, "Marcus said you're losing him anyway. Ruthie said frightened men see and look away. Priya said you're treating what you want like something you have to protect from him." "Something did shift," she said. It came out steady, which surprised her. "But it didn't shift recently. It's been there for a long time. I've just been managing it." He was very still. "Asher?" She turned the mug in her hands, looked at it, looked up. "I'm going to say something, and I need you to just let me finish, without saying anything until I'm done. Can you do that?" A beat. "Yes. The Joa." She watched him register the word. The thing I say every Sunday, you know the one. He nodded, barely. It's not a joke. She said it simply, without any trembling or drama, just the plain fact of it after 13 years. It has never been a joke. I started saying it when I was 19 because I needed somewhere to put the truth that wouldn't scare either of us, and I've been saying it every week since then because… She stopped, started again. Because I love you. Not the way friends love each other, though that's part of it. I mean the other kind. I have loved you that way for most of the time I've known you, and I have never told you because I was afraid of losing what we had, and because the timing was always wrong, and because I kept deciding that next week or next month or next year would be better, and there was never a next week that was better, and now you're going to marry someone, and I… Her voice did something small and uncooperative at the end of that sentence. She held the rest of it. I'm not telling you to change anything. I'm not asking you to do anything with this. I can't keep carrying it without you knowing. That's all. I just needed you to know. The apartment was very quiet. Outside, a car passed. The heater ticked. Mia made a small sound in the next room, the sound of sleep, and then went quiet again. Asher did not move. He was doing the thing she recognized from years of watching him. The absolute stillness that meant the opposite of composure, that meant the inside of him was doing something complex and unresolved, and he was holding very carefully still so that the outside wouldn't show too much of it. She had said it. After 13 years, she had said it, and now it was in the room between them, and there was no taking it back. And she found, to her own surprise, that she didn't want to take it back. It was terrifying, and it was also the first moment in a very long time that felt like solid ground. Lena, he said, you don't have to… Lena. His voice was different. She had never heard it quite this way, stripped of the careful quality it usually had, the management, raw in a way she wasn't prepared for. How long, exactly? Since the hospital waiting room, when Claire… She paused. I recognized it there, but I think it started before that. I just didn't have a name for it. He pressed both hands over his face. Not dramatically, just the gesture of a man who needed a moment, needed to put something between himself and the air while he processed. 8 years, he said to his own hands. At least. He dropped his hands, looked at her, and there was something in his face that she had never seen there before, not in 13 years, not grief, not relief, not the careful, composed expression he wore for difficult things. Something more unguarded than all of those. Something that looked, from where she was sitting, very much like recognition. The joke, he said slowly, every Sunday. Every Sunday. And I… He stopped. The muscle in his jaw moved. I laughed. You always laughed. Because I thought… He exhaled, short and rough. I thought it was the only safe version of the thing we could say. She stared at him. He stared back, and in the particular suspended silence of that moment, something shifted between them again. Not away from each other, this time, but toward, closing a distance that had been maintained so carefully for so long that the maintenance had become invisible. What does that mean? She said, very carefully. Asher. What does that mean? He opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked away from her for a moment, at the coffee table, at the unfinished drawing of Cobalt mid-flight, with one wing waiting to be detailed, and his expression was the expression of a man standing at a threshold that has been waiting for him for a very long time and realizing, too late, that he has nearly walked past it forever. I think it means, he said slowly, that I have been a coward for a very long time. The room was very still. I was afraid, he said. After Claire, I built walls around everything that mattered, including you. Especially you. He turned back to her. Every time something started to feel like more than friendship, I shut it down. Told myself I was protecting you, protecting what we had. That you deserved better than a man who was still… He stopped. I told myself all of it was noble. That I was being careful. You were being careful, she said. I was being a coward, he said. There's a difference. She remembered Ruthie saying that. Stupid men don't see. Frightened men see and look away. She had not known, sitting at Ruthie's counter in the pre-opening quiet, that she was hearing a description that applied to both of them, that they had both been standing in front of the same door and calling it something other than what it was. Asher, she said. Diana. Something moved across his face, complicated and honest. I know. You're going to propose. You told her. You can't. She heard herself sounding like someone trying to apply logic to something that had moved past logic, and she stopped. What are you going to do? I don't know, he said. And for the first time in all the years she had known him, she believed that completely, that he genuinely didn't know, that he was sitting in the middle of something without a plan, without the careful structure he usually brought to difficult decisions, with nothing except what had just been put in front of him by someone who had been carrying it for 13 years. I'm sorry, she said. I know the timing. Don't apologize. Asher, Lena. His voice was low and steady, and had the quality she associated with him at his most serious, the quality that meant he was about to say something he had made a decision about. Don't apologize for telling me the truth. Whatever else happens, don't apologize for that. She pressed her lips together, nodded once. They sat in the quiet again, but it was a different quiet now. Not comfortable exactly, honest. The particular quality of a silence where something has been said that cannot be unsaid, and both people are sitting in the aftermath of it, trying to figure out what the ground looks like now. After a long moment, Asher said, I need to think. I know. He stopped. I need to figure out what's right. Not just for me. For Mia. For Diana. She doesn't deserve to be. He stopped again. She doesn't deserve to be the person who gets less than the whole of something. She deserves better than that. She does, Lena agreed, and she meant it genuinely, without any strategy behind it. He looked at her. I might get this wrong, he said. Whatever I decide, I might get it wrong. You might, she said. You usually don't, but you might. He almost smiled. Not quite. You've always been the only person who says that to me. Someone has to. The smile made it the rest of the way, small and tired and real. And then it faded, because the situation was what it was, and smiling didn't change the weight of it. From the next room, Mia stirred. They both heard it, the particular quality of waking up sounds, the small shift from sleep to consciousness. They both looked toward the doorway, and in that shared automatic attention to the child in the next room, something happened that Lena felt in a way she couldn't have explained. The particular intimacy of two people who had been looking in the same direction, toward the same small person, for years. Mia appeared in the doorway. Her hair had done something complicated in sleep. She had the unfinished cobalt drawing in her hand, carried along without knowing, the way children carry things. I fell asleep, she said, with the dignity of someone who is not embarrassed about this. You did, Asher said, gentle, the voice he used exclusively for her. Mia looked between them. 7-year-olds are perceptive in ways that are frequently inconvenient. She looked at her father. She looked at Lena. She looked at the space between them on the couch, which was not a large space. Not a small one either, but not large. Did something happen? She asked. We were just talking, Asher said. Mia considered this with visible skepticism. You both look like when something happened, but you're not saying. We were talking about grown-up things, Lena said. It's fine. Mia appeared to accept this with the practiced patience of a child who has spent her whole life waiting for adults to make sense. She climbed onto the couch on Asher's other side, tucked herself against his arm, and held up the unfinished drawing. Cobalt needs his other wing, she said. After dinner, Asher said. Before dinner, his wing is urgent. Why is it urgent? Because he's flying in this one. He can't fly with one wing. Mia was very clear about this. That's just physics. She's right, Lena said. Asher looked at her over Mia's head. Something passed between them. Not resolved, not finished, nothing like closure, but acknowledged, present. The beginning of something that would take time and difficulty and the courage to see it through. But there, between them, finally out in the air where it had always belonged. Physics, he agreed. He reached over and picked up a crayon. Lena watched him start to draw the wing, careful and slow, letting Mia direct the shape. And she sat in the warm apartment on a Saturday afternoon in November with her hands around a mug of cooling coffee and the weight she had carried for 13 years sitting differently now. Not gone, not resolved, but different. She had said it, and he had heard it, and whatever came next would come next. She stayed for another hour. She and Mia finished Cobalt's wing together, Mia's lines bold and confident, Lena's following where Mia pointed. And they ate dinner from takeout containers because Asher had planned to cook and then not cooked, and no one mentioned why. Mia talked through most of the meal about Cobalt's next adventure, which apparently involved a mountain and a misunderstanding with some goats. Asher listened with one part of his attention, while the other part went somewhere she could see but not read. When she left, Mia hugged her at the door for longer than usual. Children sense things they can't name. Lena held on. "You'll come back?" Mia asked, into her shoulder. "Yes," Lena said. "I'll always come back." She meant it. Whatever happened between her and Asher, whatever the next weeks looked like, whatever decisions got made or not made, she meant that completely. Mia was not a casualty of adult complexity. She had decided that a long time ago, before she had ever needed to. She rode the elevator down. Terrence said goodnight. She walked out into the cold. She didn't check her phone, she didn't call Marcus or text her mother. She just walked for a while in the direction of the subway, through the early dark of a November Saturday, through the city doing its ordinary evening thing, and she breathed the cold air and let herself feel what she was feeling without immediately organizing it into something manageable. Terrified. She felt terrified. She also felt, underneath the terror and mixed into it in a way that made no simple sense, something that was not quite relief but was in the same family. The family of things that happen when you stop carrying something alone. He had said, "I think I have been a coward for a very long time." He had said, "I thought it was the only safe version of the thing we could say." She turned those sentences over as she walked. She didn't know what to do with them yet. They were not answers. They were not a resolution or a promise or anything she could put weight on. He was still with Diana. He was still, as far as she knew, planning to propose at Christmas. He had a life that did not currently include her in the way she had just admitted she wanted, and that life was real, and it had a real woman in it, a good woman by all evidence, and Lena was not interested in becoming the reason someone else's heart broke. She did not want him if it cost Diana something she hadn't agreed to pay. She had said what she'd said because she needed him to know, not to change his decision, not to win something, just to stop being the only person in the room who was carrying the whole weight of a 13-year truth. Now he knew. Now whatever happened next was not hers alone to carry. The subway entrance appeared. She went down the stairs into the underground warmth, the specific smell of it, the sound of a distant train making its way through the dark tunnels beneath the city. She stood on the platform and thought about the unfinished drawing. One wing carefully held in place while the other got filled in. The way Mia had looked between them on the couch with 7 years' worth of instinct running quiet calculations. The way Asher had looked at the coffee table before he said, "I think I have been a coward." The train came. She got on. She rode it home in the direction of her studio, her apartment, her life, the small and genuine and imperfect life she had built with her own scarred hands. And somewhere between the 4th and 5th stop, she started to cry, quietly. The way you cry on a subway when you need to, and you're trying not to bother anyone. Not from sadness, exactly. Not from hope, exactly. From the particular exhaustion of having finally said the true thing after 13 years of saying everything around it. She wiped her face with her sleeve. The woman across from her met her eyes briefly and looked away with the discreet grace of a subway rider who has seen everything and minds none of it. Lena looked at her own reflection in the dark window opposite. Rust-colored sweater, hair escaping its band, eyes slightly red from the crying she had just done. The recognizable face of a 30-year-old woman sitting in a difficult moment of her own making and not running from it. She could work with that. She had worked with less. She got off at her stop and walked the 3 blocks home in the cold, and let herself into her apartment and sat in the dark kitchen for a moment before turning on the light, just sitting in what the day had been, and then she turned on the light and put the kettle on and sat at her small table and waited for the water to boil. Her phone lit up, a text from Asher. She looked at it for a long moment before opening it. It said, "Thank you for today. Mia has declared it a success. Cobalt's wing looks right." She read it twice. Then, "Are you okay?" She thought about the question. The honest answer, the real answer, the one she was committed to giving now that she had stopped performing okay at him, was complicated. Was yes and no, and I don't know, and also a third thing she didn't have a word for yet. She typed, "Getting there." She looked at it for a moment, then added, "Thank you for listening." He didn't respond right away. She made her tea and sat with it and didn't check the phone. When she looked, 20 minutes later, there was one more text. "I have a lot of thinking to do," he had written, "but Lena, I heard you. I'm not going to pretend I didn't." She set the phone down. Outside her window, the city moved through its Saturday night. Lights and noise and the ongoing ordinary life of people going places. Making plans, sitting in their own difficult kitchens with cups of tea and unanswered questions. She was one of those people, tonight. Just a woman at a kitchen table in November, waiting to see what would come next. She didn't know what would come next. She genuinely didn't. And that was, she decided, looking out at the lit windows of the building across the street, the most honest place she had occupied in 13 years. The kettle had gone cold. She made more tea. She would wait, and she would work, and she would show up to the diner on Sunday the way she always did, and she would find out, eventually, what an honest version of her life looked like. For now, that was enough. It had to be. The thinking Asher said he needed to do took 9 days. Lena knew this because she counted them, not obsessively, or not only obsessively, but in the way you count the days of something difficult, the way you count the days of being sick, not to hurry them, but to know where you are in the middle of it. 9 days in which he texted her twice, both times about ordinary things. Once to send a photo of Mia's finished cobalt drawing, the wing now complete and colored a deep blue that Mia had apparently spent 20 minutes selecting from the crayon box. And once to ask if she knew a good plumber because the one his building used was booked out 3 weeks. She gave him a name. He said thanks. That was the full extent of their contact for 9 days, which was the longest stretch without real conversation they had managed in 13 years. And the silence had a specific texture to it that was different from comfortable silence. It had the texture of two people giving each other room to think, which sounds considerate and is also just a different kind of hard. She worked. She finished the botanical sleeve across 3 sessions, the blue-eyed Susan coming in on the last day with a precision that made the client go quiet and then say, with genuine feeling, that it was exactly right, that his grandmother would have known it. Lena cleaned her equipment afterward and sat for a while in the empty studio and thought about how she had spent 13 years putting permanent things on other people and had never once allowed herself to put the permanent thing where it belonged. Marcus came by on the 4th day, and she told him what had happened at the apartment. The whole thing, the couch, what she'd said, what Asher had said, the silence since. He listened without interrupting, which was not his natural state, and when she finished, he sat with it for a moment before saying anything. He said he thought it was the only safe version of the thing you could say, Marcus repeated, slowly, like someone examining an object from multiple angles. Yes, Lena, I know. That's not the answer of a man who doesn't feel anything. It's also not the answer of a man who isn't currently in a relationship with someone else. She was folding a clean towel that didn't need to be folded. She was aware of this. She kept doing it. He said he had a lot of thinking to do. I'm letting him think. And if he thinks himself back to Diana? She put the towel down. Then he thinks himself back to Diana. And I was right to tell him regardless because I can't keep carrying the secret version of my own life. And at least now he knows. And at least now I know whether... She stopped. I needed to say it. Whatever happens because of it, I needed to say it. Marcus nodded. Yeah, he said. You did. He paused. You doing okay? I'm doing the thing I do when things are hard, which is working too much and sleeping not enough and thinking in circles. That's very you. Everyone keeps saying that. On the 6th day, she got a call from a number she didn't recognize that turned out to be Diana Hartwell's. She stood in the middle of her studio holding the phone for 3 full seconds after the name came through the speaker. Diana had apparently been saved in her contacts at some point. She didn't remember when. Probably Asher had sent her the number months ago with some casual note about getting together for coffee that had never materialized. And she felt the particular specific dread of something you were not prepared for arriving ahead of schedule. She answered, "Lena." Diana's voice was measured and careful in the way of someone who had rehearsed what they were going to say and was now saying it. It was also, underneath the carefulness, genuinely human, a little unsteady, trying not to be. "I'm sorry to call without... Asher doesn't know I'm calling. I want to be clear about that." Lena sat down on the edge of her work chair. "Okay. I want to meet you," Diana said. Not in the way we'd planned, not a casual coffee. I mean, actually meet you. Have an honest conversation." A pause. "I think you know why." Everything about this moment was the opposite of what Lena would have chosen. And also, she recognized with the particular exhaustion of someone who has recently committed to honesty as a practice, the meeting was necessary. It was the right thing. It was going to be terrible. "Yes," she said. "Okay. When?" They agreed on Thursday, a coffee place near Diana's office in the financial district, neutral ground in the most literal sense. Lena arrived 8 minutes early, which she spent sitting at a corner table staring at the menu she wasn't going to order from and rehearsing exactly nothing, because she had decided that the thing that had gotten her this far was the decision to stop rehearsing and start actually saying true things, and she was going to apply that here too. Diana arrived exactly on time. She was not what Lena had expected, which was not fair to either of them because Lena had spent 6 weeks constructing an idea of Diana from secondhand information and her own anxiety, and the real Diana, walking through the door of the coffee shop in a charcoal coat with her dark hair pulled back and her face wearing the expression of someone trying very hard to be present for something difficult, was a person in her own right. 34, composed in a way that had clearly been practiced but wasn't false, with sharp dark eyes that moved around the room quickly and found Lena with the directness of someone who had been thinking about this moment and was not going to waste it. She sat down. She ordered nothing. She put her hands on the table, one over the other, and looked at Lena directly. "He told me," Diana said. "What you said, at the apartment." Lena held still. "All of it?" "He told me you'd been in love with him for a long time. He told me he..." She paused. The composure wavered just slightly at the edges. "He told me he thought he had been hiding from his own feelings for years. He didn't use those words, but that's what he meant." She looked down at her hands, then up. "He hasn't ended things. He doesn't know what he wants to do. He said he needed to be honest with me about what was happening before he figured that out." A dry, not quite laugh. "He's a very honest man, actually. It's one of the things I..." She stopped. "It's one of the things." "Diana." Lena kept her voice even. "I didn't tell him to change anything. I wasn't trying to..." "I know." Diana said it without hostility, without anything except the flatness of someone who is being very precise because the alternative is something they can't afford right now. "He told me that too. He said you told him because you needed him to know, not as an ultimatum, not a strategy." She exhaled. "I believe that. I want you to know I believe that, because the alternative is being angry at you. And I've been thinking about this for 3 days, and I don't think anger is... I don't think it would be honest." Lena said nothing. This was the kind of conversation you didn't fill with reassurances, because reassurances would be dishonest, and the woman across from her was clearly someone who could smell the difference. "Tell me something," Diana said. "And I'm asking you, not him, because you'll give me the true version. How long have you known him?" 13 years. Diana looked at the table for a moment. Something moved across her face that Lena recognized, distantly, as the expression of someone doing math they already knew the answer to and having the answer land anyway. "He said that. She exhaled. 13 years is a long time to know someone and not say the thing. "It is," Lena agreed. "What stopped you?" It was not phrased as a question, but she answered it like one, because Diana deserved a real answer more than she deserved Lena's self-protection. "Fear," she said. His grief after his wife. The friendship. Mia. She paused. Mostly fear. I was afraid of losing what I had with him by asking for what I actually wanted. So I kept the thing I had, and it was real, and it was good, and it was never the whole truth. Diana was quiet for a moment. She looked, Lena thought, like a woman sitting in a conclusion she had already reached but was still processing the weight of. I knew, Diana said. Not specifically, but I knew there was something, a part of him that wasn't fully there. I told myself it was grief, that he was still carrying Claire, that it would shift over time. She met Lena's eyes. I'm a practical person. I don't fall into things easily. I was with him because I thought we were genuinely building something. Her jaw tightened. I wasn't wrong. He's a good man. He tried. He did, Lena said, and meant it. But you can't give someone the whole of something when there's a room inside you that's always been someone else's. Diana said it without bitterness, which was the most painful version of that sentence, the one that had been arrived at through 3 days of real thinking rather than wounded reaction. I knew the room existed, I just didn't know whose it was. She picked up her bag. She was not going to order anything, Lena understood, because this was not a sit-and-talk meeting. It was a say-the-necessary-thing-and-leave meeting, and Diana was almost at the end of the necessary thing. I'm going to end it, Diana said. I want you to know that I'm doing it, not him, not because I'm making a sacrifice for anyone, but because, she paused, because I deserve someone whose love is complete. The whole of it, not the part that's left after the part that belongs somewhere else. She stood. She looked at Lena one more time, and the look had something in it that was not warmth exactly, and not hostility either, but the flat, clear-eyed regard of one honest person for another. Take care of him, she said. And the little girl, she's something else. She left. Lena sat at the corner table for a while after Diana walked out through the door, watching the space where she had been, and felt the complicated, terrible thing that happens when someone behaves with more grace than you have any right to expect, and you have to simply sit in the fact of it without being able to do anything to make it cost them less. She didn't order anything either, in the end. She put money on the table for a coffee she hadn't had, because the woman behind the counter had been patient and deserved something for her patience, and she walked out into the December cold. She did not call Asher. Whatever was happening between him and Diana was happening, and it was not hers to be part of, and she had learned in the last several weeks that the middle of other people's necessary things was not a place she was entitled to occupy. She had said her part. Diana had said her part. Asher would do what Asher would do, and she would wait, and she would not perform waiting while actually trying to influence the outcome. She would actually wait. She walked 20 minutes back to the studio. She had a 4 o'clock appointment, a first session on a memorial piece for a woman who had lost her brother, a small sparrow on her wrist, the exact size of her brother's handwriting, because the woman had brought in a birthday card he'd written her 2 years before he died and asked if they could work from that. It was one of the most careful sessions Lena had ever done, translating the loose, slightly tilted quality of a person's handwriting into the shape of a wing, trying to honor the accident of it, the realness of it, the way it looked like him and not like a drawing of a bird. The woman cried quietly twice, not from pain, and Lena talked her through the design the way she always talked people through difficult pieces. Not with false comfort, but with focused attention. This line here, this curve. Stay with me. When it was done, the woman held her wrist up to the light and looked at the sparrow for a long time without saying anything. It's right, she said finally. It is, Lena agreed. After the woman left, Lena cleaned up slowly and sat in the quiet studio and looked at the wall where Mia's drawings were framed. The Horse Dragon series, Cobalt, in various stages of development. The first one with the big smiled person and the crowned dragon and the star at the end of Mia's name. She looked at them for a while. Then she turned off the jasmine candle and put on her coat and went home. The call came on the 9th day. She was in the middle of making dinner. Not a real dinner, soup from a can because she had not had the bandwidth for a real dinner in about 2 weeks. When her phone lit up with Asher's name and she turned down the heat on the soup and stood in her kitchen and answered. Hey, she said. Hey. A pause. Are you home? Yes. Diana ended things, he said. She kept very still. I know. A beat. You know. She called me. Thursday. We met for coffee. Another pause, longer this time, with a quality to it she couldn't quite read through the phone. She didn't tell me that. She told me not to mention it, but I'm done not saying things. She leaned against the counter. She's a remarkable person. She is. His voice was quiet and carried the specific weight of someone sitting in the aftermath of something that had cost more than one person. She said she deserved someone whose love was complete. She said it exactly that way. He paused. She was right. She was. I handled it wrong, he said. The whole thing. I moved too fast into something I wasn't fully present for. And she deserved better than that from the beginning, and I'm going to have to sit with that. He wasn't asking for absolution. He was just naming it, the way he named things when he was trying to be accountable to himself. She's going to be fine, I think. She's one of those people who lands on her feet. But that doesn't mean I didn't. I made a mistake, and it cost her. Yeah, Lena said, simply. It did. He seemed to appreciate that she didn't soften it. She heard a slow exhale on the other end. I need to see you, Doug, he said. Not Sunday, before Sunday. Can I come by the studio tomorrow morning? Before you open? Something moved through her that was too large and too complicated to name. She did not call it hope, because hope was a thing she had been managing very carefully for 9 days, and she was not ready to let it run unsupervised. She called it present tense. She called it, tomorrow morning, the studio, a conversation with her eyes open. Yes, she said. 8 o'clock. I'll have coffee. Real coffee or not from the studio machine. I'll get it from the place on the corner. Okay. Another pause, the warm, present kind. Lena. Yeah. I'm sorry it took me so long to... He stopped. I'm sorry for the length of it. The cowardice. Whatever the right word is. I know, she said. I was a coward too. It goes both ways. It does, he said. But I'm still sorry. She looked at her soup cooling on the stove. Go be with Mia, she said. I'll see you tomorrow. She heard the shift in his breathing that meant he was smiling. Yeah, okay. A beat. She wants to know if you're coming for Cobalt's next adventure. There's a sequel in progress. There's always a sequel in progress. The goats are back. She won't tell me what they did, but she says it's serious. I'll be there, Lena said. Go. She hung up. She stood in the kitchen for a long moment before turning the soup back on, and she did not cry this time, which felt significant in a small way. She just stood there in the ordinary kitchen of her ordinary apartment and breathed and let the day be what it was. She did not sleep well. She had known she wouldn't. She lay in the dark and listened to the city and thought about tomorrow and resisted the impulse to construct a version of it in advance, to script it, to run the possible conversations like rehearsals. She had decided she was done rehearsing. Whatever tomorrow was, it would be what it was. She would show up to it without armor and without a plan, and she would say the true thing and listen to the true thing, and the rest would be what it was. At 4:30, she gave up on sleep and went to the studio. She turned on the lights over her workstation and looked at the walls for a while, her flash art, the framed prints, the Mia drawings. And then she sat in her chair and sketched for 2 hours. Not a commission, just her own hand moving across the paper in the direction of something that didn't have a name yet. It turned out to be a wing. She didn't plan it. It just came out that way. One wing, detailed and careful, the feathers worked in with a precision she brought to things she cared about. She looked at it when she was done. Then she folded it along the middle, carefully, and put it in her jacket pocket. She went and got the coffee at 5 minutes to 8 from the corner place that was already open because the city was always open. And she came back and unlocked the studio door and stood in the quiet space that was entirely hers. Her equipment, her art on the walls, her chair that had the specific indent of her particular way of sitting, the jasmine candles she burned too often, the sketches accumulating on the drafting table, and she thought, this is my life. The actual life she had built, the one that existed independent of Asher or anyone else, the one she had maintained through financial disasters and difficult clients, and the radiator that screamed in all of it. She was proud of it. She had not been sufficiently proud of it, she thought, too often measuring it against the scale of Asher's life and finding it smaller, when in fact size was the wrong measure entirely. She had built something real. She put permanent things on people who needed to carry something. She deserved to stand in her own life and call it enough. The bell above the studio door had a lower, flatter sound than the one at the diner. She heard it at exactly 8 o'clock. He looked like he had also not slept. He was wearing the gray coat she had always hated, and for the first time in 3 years she did not hate it, she just registered it as the coat he wore, the familiar coat belonging to this specific person, and felt something settle in her at the sight of him standing in her doorway. "You found it," she said. He had been to the studio before, multiple times. It was a joke about nothing, and they both knew it. Navigation was tricky, he said. Also a joke about nothing. The easy rhythm of 13 years, present even now, even here. She handed him the coffee. He accepted it with both hands. He looked around the studio the way he sometimes did, taking inventory, checking for changes, the specific attention of someone who knows a place and wants to know if the place knows it. His eyes stopped at the Mia drawings on the wall. Something in his face went soft. "She's going to be so smug when she's older," he said. "About this, about having her art in a real studio. She should be smug. The dragon horse thing has real internal logic. The dual identity narrative has legs, I'll grant her that." They stood with the coffee and the morning and the particular quality of a studio before clients arrive, when it's still and slightly cold and belongs to itself. She had not played any music. She had thought about it and decided against it, the way you decide against things that are designed to fill space when the space itself might need to be empty. "I want to talk to you," Asher said, "and I want to do it without... I don't want to have a prepared version of this. I've been preparing things for 9 days, and I don't think prepared is the right mode for us right now." "Agreed," she said. He looked at her, the tired brown eyes and the gray coat and the small amount of unguarded in him that she had always valued and that was right now more visible than she had ever seen it. He looked like a man who had spent 9 days going through several rooms of himself and had come out the other side knowing what was in them. "Here's what I know," he said. "I know that I have spent years, a lot of years, doing the thing you described, protecting what we had by keeping it exactly what it was, telling myself the preservation of the friendship was worth the cost of not..." He stopped, started again. "I told myself a lot of things, that it was noble, that you deserved better than a man still carrying grief, that Mia needed stability before anything else. All of those things were partially true, and I used them as complete explanations when they were really just..." He looked at his coffee. "I was afraid. That's the bottom of it. I was afraid you'd say no. I was afraid you'd say yes. I was afraid of what it would mean to need something that much from a person and then lose it." He looked up. "I lost Claire without any preparation, and it rearranged something. And rather than deal with that rearrangement, I protected myself from it by holding you at exactly this distance that felt like closeness because we were together every week, but wasn't, not fully." She listened. She did not interrupt. She had promised she wouldn't, and she kept the promise, and she stood there with her coffee and let him say it all the way through. "What you said at the apartment..." He paused. "It didn't shock me. That's the thing I kept sitting with for 9 days. It didn't shock me. There was no moment where I thought, I had no idea. There was only a moment where I thought, I have been choosing not to know this." He set his cup down on the counter. "That's different. That's not obliviousness. That's a choice I made repeatedly, every Sunday, and I need to own that." "I made the same choice," she said. "We were both choosing." "We were." He looked at her. "But I'm done choosing it." The studio was very quiet. Outside, the street was doing its early morning thing. A delivery truck, someone walking a dog, the particular quality of a city at 8 a.m. that is different from any other hour, because it has the feeling of things beginning. She reached into her jacket pocket. She took out the folded paper. She held it for a moment, then crossed the space between them and put it in his hand. He looked at it. "What is this?" "I drew it at 4:30 this morning. I couldn't sleep." He unfolded it carefully, looked at the wing. One wing, detailed and complete, with the feathers worked in. He looked at it for a long time. She watched his face while he looked at it, and she saw the moment when he understood what it was. Not just a drawing of a wing, but a wing waiting for the other half. A thing built halfway, on purpose, because some things are designed for more than one pair of hands. "Lena," he said, quietly. Not the managed version of her name, the real one. "I know," she said. "I know it's complicated. I know I know there's a cost to this, and it's not just ours to bear. I'm not asking you to pretend that's simple." "It's not simple," he agreed, "but I want to try. If you want to try, without the joke as a cover for it, without the safe version." She looked at him steadily. The actual thing, whatever that looks like. He had the drawing in one hand and the coffee in the other, and he looked at her across the small studio that was completely hers, her equipment and her art and her working hands and her life. And she looked back at him across 13 years of Sundays and the particular unbreakable thing they had built out of all of them. "I want to try," he said. He said it simply, the way he said things when he had come all the way down through the layers to where the true version lived. She nodded. Once, the nod of someone who has been standing in front of a door for 13 years and has finally stopped talking about the door and just opened it. "You're still wearing that coat," she said. He looked down at it. "You've always hated this coat. It makes you look like a person from a different world." "I am from a different world." "I know," she said. "Come for coffee on Sunday anyway." He looked at her, the small smile beginning to arrive at the corner of his mouth, taking its time, reaching his eyes last. "I'll be there at 8:47. "That's not on time." "It's the same time I always arrive." "That has never been on time." The smile made it all the way through. She felt it in the specific place she had always felt it, and she did not manage the feeling this time. She let it be there, all of it, present and full, and not shrunk to fit the available space. She picked up her own coffee and looked at the drawings on the wall. "Tell Mia I want to hear about the goats." "She's been waiting," Asher said. "She has opinions about them. She has opinions about everything. She comes by it honestly." He folded the wing drawing carefully back along its creases, the way she had, and put it in his coat pocket. Not the inside pocket, the chest pocket. The outside one, close to his hand, where he could reach it. He left 20 minutes later when she had her first client arriving. He passed the client in the doorway. A college student with her appointment card already out, and a photograph on her phone of the small constellation she wanted on her collarbone. And he said good morning to her with the easy warmth of someone who is, for the first time in a long time, not carrying the weight of everything he has not said. Lena watched him go through the glass door. He used his hand, paying attention. She turned to her client. "Come in," she said. "Let me see the constellation." The girl held out the phone. It was Orion, the hunter, the one that appears in winter, the one you can find if you know where to look. Lena looked at it for a moment. Then she said, "Let's make it permanent." She sat down at her station and got to work. The first Sunday after Asher came to the studio was different, in the way that things are different when the structure holding them is the same, but the thing inside the structure has changed. The booth was the same booth. The coffee was still burnt. Ruthie set down the world's okayest employee mug without being asked, the cream pitcher Lena never touched, and went back to the kitchen without comment. The brass bell above the door made its single flat complaint when Asher came through at 8:47, which was not on time and never had been, and he sat down across from her with his coat half unwound and his hair slightly disordered from the cold outside. But he looked at her differently, not with new eyes. He had the same eyes he had always had, tired and brown and carrying more than the rest of his face admitted, but without the particular quality of managed distance that she had been watching him maintain for years without having the right word for it. The management was gone. He was just looking at her, present, all the way. "You're late," she said. "By 7 minutes this time." "You're getting worse. Traffic was—" "You live 4 blocks away." "There were circumstances," he said, and flagged Ruthie down, and she felt something uncurl in her chest at the ordinariness of it. The way the ordinary things had not disappeared but had simply become themselves without the weight of everything unspoken pressing down on them from above. They talked for 2.5 hours. Not about the situation, not about Diana or what had happened or what came next in any formal sense. They talked the way they had always talked about his project on 8th Street, about the botanical sleeve client who had come back to show her how it had healed, about Mia's escalating goat narrative, about a documentary Lena had watched at 2 in the morning about deep-sea creatures that had genuinely unsettled her in a way she found difficult to articulate. He told her he had taken Mia to a natural history museum the previous weekend, and she had stood in front of a dinosaur skeleton for 40 minutes without moving, and then said, very seriously, that she thought the dinosaurs had probably been fine with going extinct because they had no way of knowing it was going to happen. And so they weren't afraid. He had not known what to do with that, philosophically. Lena said she thought Mia might be the most psychologically interesting 7-year-old she had ever encountered. He agreed with the expression of a man who was simultaneously proud and mildly concerned. At the end, when he was putting his coat back on, she looked at him across the table and felt the ritual rising in her the way it always did. The words she had said every Sunday for 13 years, the groove worn so deep by repetition that her mouth knew the shape of them without being asked. She said them. "You're not allowed to date anyone else." He stilled, just for a moment, the coat half on his shoulder, his hands at the lapels. He looked at her. "I know," he said. But this time the two words landed differently than they ever had before, because this time both of them understood what they were actually saying. Not the joke, not the safe version. The real thing, spoken aloud in a diner on a Sunday morning, wearing the clothes of an old ritual, but meaning exactly what it had always meant underneath. Ruthie, passing with a coffee carafe, did not stop. But Lena caught, from the corner of her eye, the very small and very satisfied expression that crossed the old woman's face as she went by. The expression of someone who has been patient for a very long time and has just watched the thing they were patient for arrive. What followed was not a movie. Lena had been in the world long enough to know that real things don't move the way scripted things do. Don't resolve cleanly into the next scene. Don't skip the awkward middle portions where two people are figuring out how to be a different thing than they have been for 13 years. The awkward middle portions existed. They were real and they were necessary. And they were, in their own way, the most important part. The first time Asher held her hand was not romantic in any cinematic sense. It was a Thursday evening in December, 3 weeks after the studio morning, and they were walking back from a school event of Mia's, a winter performance in which Mia had played a tree and had done so with the full commitment of someone who had decided that if you were going to be a tree, you were going to be the most present tree anyone had ever seen. They were walking through the cold, their breath visible in the air, and Lena was saying something about how Mia had made eye contact with the audience during a section where the tree was not supposed to be doing anything, and she was laughing about it, and Asher reached over without saying anything and took her hand. She stopped talking mid-sentence. He kept walking. She started talking again, about the eye contact, about the performance, about the fact that Mia had afterward explained that trees have awareness of their environment, and it would have been unrealistic to pretend otherwise. She kept talking, and he kept holding her hand, and neither of them said anything about it directly, because it didn't need to be said directly. It was just a hand, held in December, by two people who had been walking next to each other for 13 years and had finally closed the remaining distance. Her hand was cold. His was warmer, which was something she stored in the inventory she had been keeping for years, the one she added to now with slightly different permissions. Mia, walking ahead of them, turned around at one point, looked at their hands, and turned back around without a word. Just kept walking, slightly ahead, her winter coat too big at the shoulders the way children's coats often are, leaving them in her wake with the discreet tact of a 7-year-old who has been keeping her own counsel about certain things for longer than anyone gave her credit for. That night, after Mia was in bed and Asher and Lena were sitting in the kitchen with tea, the same kitchen where she had brought the European butter, where she had watched Mia make pancakes with a laminated recipe, he said, "She knew. I know she knew." For how long, do you think? Lena thought about Mia on the apartment couch, looking between them with 7 years' worth of quiet calculation. The way she had asked if something happened, and accepted the grown-up answer with the patience of someone who already knew, but was willing to wait. "Long time," she said. Asher looked at his tea. She told me something last week, before I came to the studio. She said, he paused, assembling the sentence carefully. She said, Dad, the drawing lady looks at you the way Cobalt looks at the mountains. Like she wants to go, but she doesn't know if she's allowed. He looked up. She's 7. Lena sat with that for a long moment. She got it exactly right, she said finally. She gets most things exactly right. I find it alarming. You should find it reassuring. I find it both. She looked at him across the kitchen table. The gray coat was on the hook by the door, which was where it belonged when he was home, and he was in a worn flannel that she recognized from years of Sunday mornings and studio visits and the long evening of the power outage when he had held a terrified 1-year-old in the dark. He looked, without the coat, like himself, the self she knew better than she had ever admitted to knowing. I want to say something, she said, and I want you to know I'm not saying it because I need you to say it back. I'm saying it because I've been practicing saying true things, and this is a true thing. He waited. I'm happy, she said. Not about everything, not us. Not about Diana, that still cost me something to think about, what that cost her. But in general, right now, in this kitchen, I'm happy. She held the mug in both hands. I hadn't been happy in a while. Functioning? Yes. Okay, mostly, but not happy the way I'm describing. She looked at him. I wanted to say it out loud because I've spent a lot of years not saying things out loud, and I'm trying to stop doing that. Asher was quiet for a moment. Then, I'm happy too, said simply, without embellishment, the way he said things at the bottom of himself. Good, she said. Good, he agreed. They drank their tea, and the kitchen was warm, and the apartment held its accumulated history around them, and outside the December city moved through its evening, and inside was just this, 2 people at a table who had finally stopped managing the distance between them. Christmas that year was different from any Christmas Lena could remember, and not because it was extraordinary in any external way. She came to Asher's apartment on Christmas morning because Mia had requested her presence with the directness she brought to all requests. A text sent from Asher's phone, dictated at high speed, that said, Lena, it is Mia, please come Christmas. There are things happening that you should see. Wear something warm. We will have pancakes. I made the recipe better. She had worn something warm. The pancakes were, in fact, better. Mia had added a small amount of vanilla extract and presented this modification with the seriousness of a chef unveiling a new technique. Mia gave Lena a gift that she had made herself. It was a drawing, a new one, not from the Cobalt series, but something different. 3 figures drawn with the full bold line commitment of Mia's current style. A tall one with wavy hair that was clearly Lena. A tall one with straight hair that was clearly Asher, and a small one between them with a star next to her name that was clearly Mia. They were standing in front of a building that Lena recognized after a moment as the diner. The diner had the brass bell above the door, rendered in careful yellow crayon. Above the whole drawing, in Mia's block letters, U.S. Lena looked at the drawing for a long time. It's us, Mia said, in case the labeling had been insufficient. I see that. Lena's voice did the small, uncooperative thing. She cleared her throat. It's exactly right. I practiced the hair, Mia said. Yours was hard. It's hard for everyone. Mia climbed into the space next to Lena on the couch, with the ease of someone who has decided this is where she belongs and has stopped asking permission for it. She looked at the drawing over Lena's arm. Do you like it? I love it, Lena said. I'm going to frame it. I know, Mia said. I made it frame-sized on purpose. Asher, from across the room where he was doing something with the coffee maker, made a sound that was the suppressed version of a laugh. Lena looked at him. He looked back. The small smile arriving in its usual way, taking its time. She framed it. It went on the wall next to the Cobalt series, the 3 figures standing in front of the diner with the brass bell in yellow crayon, and it stayed there, which is where it still is. The months that followed had the texture of things that are good but not finished, not in the sense of incomplete, but in the sense that real things don't finish. They continue. They have problems inside them that require attention. They have days where the old fear comes back and sits in the room like an uninvited guest and has to be acknowledged rather than evicted. Lena had those days. She was honest about them. The fear of losing it by having it, which had been her operating fear for 13 years, did not simply disappear because the situation had changed. It reconfigured. It found new forms to inhabit. There was a week in February when she picked a fight with him about something small, a miscommunication about plans, whether she was coming for dinner on Tuesday or Thursday, whether she had said Tuesday or he had assumed it. And the fight was not about the dinner at all. It was about her terror that she had waited 13 years for something, and now that she had it, the waiting would turn out to have been the easy part, that the actual having of it would require her to be more present and more vulnerable than the wanting had. She said things that were sharper than the situation warranted. He pushed back calmly in the way he pushed back when he had decided something deserved a direct response. "You're doing the thing," he said. "What thing?" "The thing where you make the target smaller so it's harder to hit." She stared at him. "That's a very specific diagnosis. I've known you for 13 years. I know your defensive patterns. You—" She stopped. "You really do." "Yes." He was not angry. He was just clear. "I'm not going anywhere. I want you to know that. Not because things are easy. They're not always easy, and I don't expect them to be, but because I made a decision, and it's not the kind I walk back from." He paused. "But I need you to stop building exits into things when things are actually fine. It's not fair to either of us." She sat with that for a moment, the accuracy of it, the specific discomfort of being seen clearly by someone who knows where to look. "Okay," she said. "You're right. I know. Don't be smug about it." "I'm not being smug." "You're being a little smug." He almost smiled. "I'm being accurate." "Same thing sometimes." She exhaled. "I'm sorry. For the sharp things." "I know." He said it simply. "And I'm sorry for assuming the Tuesday." "You definitely assumed the Tuesday." "I did assume the Tuesday." They looked at each other. The fight deflated, the way real fights between real people deflate when both parties are paying attention. Not dramatically, not with a grand gesture, but with the quiet return to solid ground that happens when two people decide the ground matters more than being right. She stayed for dinner. It was Thursday. Lena's studio did not transform overnight into something financially stable just because her personal life had improved. That is not how studios work, or life. The radiator screamed again in March. A client she had been counting on for a large commission backed out at the last minute for reasons that were genuinely out of his control, which did not make the financial gap less real. She spent 2 weeks eating carefully and moving money between accounts and working late and being honest with Asher about the situation when he asked, which was the new part, the honesty. In the old configuration, she would have said fine and meant managing. Now she said, "It's a difficult month. I'm handling it, but it's difficult." He did not offer to fix it. He had learned over years that the offer was not what she needed, and she had learned over the same years that letting someone know a difficulty existed was not the same as asking them to solve it. He said, "Let me know if that changes." She said she would. That was the whole of it, and it was enough. And the month resolved itself the way difficult months do when you have the skills to get through them, which she did. She had always had the skills, she had just been carrying them alone longer than was necessary. Marcus took her to dinner in April and said, about 40 minutes in, with the air of someone delivering a verdict, "You're different." "Different how?" "Less like someone waiting for something bad to happen." He pointed at her with his fork. "You've been waiting for something bad to happen for the entire time I've known you. It was like a background frequency." "Not anymore." She thought about that. "I think I was always waiting for the specific bad thing of losing Asher," she said. "And then I almost lost him in a different way. And I said the thing I should have said years ago, and now—" She paused. "Now I'm in the thing instead of waiting on the outside of it. And the thing is harder in some ways and better in most of them." "Most of them," Marcus repeated. "Not all." "Not all. Nothing is all." She picked up her wine. "Diana." He nodded. "Diana." "I think about her," Lena said. "More than you might expect. I hope she's okay. I hope she found what she said she deserved, the whole of something." She looked at the table. "I don't have a way to know that. I just hope it." "That's decent of you." It's honest of me, which I'm trying to make the same thing as decent. She did not see Diana again. She did not seek it out, and Diana, to the best of her knowledge, had moved forward in the way she had said she would, with the particular clean efficiency of someone who makes a decision and enacts it. Lena had heard, through a very indirect route that she did not follow up on, that Diana was doing well. That was enough. It had to be enough. Mia turned 8 in May. The party was at the apartment, with 4 friends from school and a cake that Mia had designed herself, blue, in honor of Cobalt, with a dragon on top that the bakery had done reasonably well, but not as well as Mia would have liked, a fact Mia communicated to the baker's representative at the party with the direct honesty she brought to all assessments. Lena made the blue-eyed Susan wildflower out of fondant as a secondary decoration and placed it on the corner of the cake because flowers and dragons belonged in the same story if you were telling it right, and Mia looked at it for a moment and then said that Lena understood the assignment. Lena took this as the highest available praise from the relevant audience. At the party, one of Mia's friends, a small girl named Petra, who had the energy of someone who had been told to calm down her entire life and had declined, tugged on Lena's sleeve during the cake portion and said, looking between Lena and Asher, "Are you his girlfriend?" Mia, who was within earshot, gave Petra a look of magnificent patience. "She's more than a girlfriend," Mia said. "Girlfriend is a temporary word." She said this with complete authority, the authority of someone who has been thinking about this. "Lena is permanent." Petra considered this. "Like a tattoo?" "Exactly like a tattoo," Mia said, and held out her plate for more cake. Lena did not trust her voice for approximately 45 seconds after that. She looked at Asher. He looked back. His expression was the one she had catalogued in the inventory, the one she had been storing for years, the small smile that took time to arrive, the one that reached the corners of his eyes last. Except now, looking at it, she understood something she had not had the vantage point to understand before. He had been looking at her with that exact expression for just as long as she had been looking at him with hers. The same inventory. Both of them, on opposite sides of the same table, storing the same evidence of the same feeling and calling it something else. They had both been so careful. And the care had cost them years. Not wasted years. The years had built the thing they had created the specific density and durability of it. But years she would not repeat the mistake of. She had learned her lesson on the subject of saying true things, and she intended to keep it learned. The proposal happened in August, on a Sunday. It was not at the diner. She learned later that Asher had considered the diner, had thought about it for a long time, and had decided against it precisely because what he wanted to say was not a performance of their history, but an addition to it. He did not want a grand gesture. He did not hire anyone or plan anything elaborate. He asked her, on a Sunday afternoon, sitting on a bench in a park they had walked through together dozens of times over the years, while Mia was with a friend and the August heat had broken enough that the day was actually pleasant. He reached into his jacket pocket and took out a ring and held it in his hand and looked at her. "I have been afraid," he said, "for most of the time I've known you, and I would like to stop being afraid now." She looked at the ring. It was not flashy. It was a thin gold band with a single dark stone, deep blue, almost black depending on the light. And it was, she thought, looking at it, exactly the thing someone who knew her well would pick. "Yes," she said, before he could follow up with anything else. "Yes, I had more to say." "You can say it anyway." He did. He said it anyway, the rest of it, the version he had been working toward, about the Sundays and the years, and the joke that was never a joke, and the room inside him that had always been organized around her without his permission. She sat on the bench in the August afternoon and listened to all of it, the way she had promised herself she would listen to true things when they were offered, fully, without the protective distance, without managing the impact of them. She let it land. All of it. The full weight of 13 years spoken plainly by a man who had finally stopped calling his feelings by a different name. When he was finished, she said, "You're not allowed to date anyone else." He laughed. The full one, the one that didn't need warming up. And then because they were finally at the place where the words meant exactly what they had always meant. "I know. I haven't been, in any way that matters, for a very long time." She put the ring on. He helped her with the clasp, which was fiddly in the way of real things, not cinematic. It took a moment. They managed it. They got married the following April, on a Saturday, inside the diner. This was Mia's idea, delivered with the confidence of someone who has identified the obvious solution and cannot understand why the adults hadn't arrived there already. She had said, approximately 4 months before the wedding, "You should get married at Ruthie's. That's where you were." And when Asher had started to explain the logistical challenges of getting married in a working diner, Mia had looked at him with infinite patience and said, "You could ask Ruthie." He had asked Ruthie. Ruthie had said without hesitating, "I've been waiting for someone to ask me that for a very long time." The diner held 40 people at capacity, which meant the guest list required ruthless editing, which Lena found easier than Asher did because she had spent her adult life in small spaces and understood that the quality of a thing was not measured by its volume. The people who mattered fit. They were the people who had been in the corners of the story all along. Marcus in the front with his octopus arm and his specific pride in the expression of someone who saw the end of a long arc. Lena's mother, Patricia, with Gerald, who turned out to be genuinely moved and said almost nothing the entire reception, which Lena found unexpectedly touching. The botanical sleeve client and his husband, who came because Lena had become, through the work, something like a friend. A handful of Asher's colleagues who were not his close friends, but who had watched him be a careful and decent person in their shared professional world for long enough to want to be present. Ruthie wore her good apron. She said she had never owned a dress that fit correctly, and she was not going to start now, and no one argued with her. Mia was the flower girl, a role she approached with the focus of a professional. She had specifically requested actual flowers, not petals, but small, full flowers. And she walked down the center of the diner between the pushed-together tables with a seriousness that made several adults cry. When she reached the end, she took up a position next to Lena and stood there with her hands clasped, composed, and certain. The ceremony was short because neither of them had wanted long. They had spent 13 years on the long version, and this was not a performance, but a statement. The person officiating was an old friend of Asher's from business school who had become a judge, which he joked was the same job with different furniture. He said a few things, they said a few things. Simple, honest, the kind of vows that are specific to the people saying them rather than borrowed from a template. Lena's vow included this: "I have been saying the same thing to you every Sunday for 13 years. I'm going to keep saying it for the rest of my life, but from now on, I'm also going to let you say it back." Asher's vow included this: "I thought I was protecting the best thing in my life by keeping it exactly what it was. I was wrong. The best thing in my life is what it becomes when we stop protecting it from each other." Ruthie, standing to the side, was looking at the floor. When she looked up, her eyes were red. She would not, for the rest of the day, acknowledge that this had happened. The reception was loud and warm and slightly chaotic in the way of gatherings inside small spaces, which is also the way of the best kinds of evenings. Someone brought food that was not on any plan. Marcus gave a toast that was supposed to be 5 minutes and was 14, and it was worth every one of them because he had known both of them long enough to say the true version of the story, which was not a clean story, but was a good one. He said, at the end of it, "Some people are afraid of how much they love someone. These two people were afraid of that for 13 years. I am glad they stopped. I was very tired of watching it." Laughter. Applause. Mia, who had been sitting next to Lena with the posture of someone at an important occasion, leaned over and whispered, "Marcus is funny, but he talked too long." "He did," Lena agreed. "You should tell him." "Later." "Promise?" "I promise." Mia accepted this and went back to her very serious attention to the proceedings. Late in the evening, when the guests had thinned and the diner had resumed something closer to its own particular quiet, Lena sat in the corner booth with her wedding clothes and her working hands, and the ring on her finger that had a slight snag she already knew she was going to have to get sorted out by a jeweler who understood delicate settings, and she looked around the room. Ruthie at the counter, finally eating something after feeding everyone else for 4 hours. Marcus and the judge still talking, the kind of talk that will go until someone physically leaves. Patricia sitting next to Gerald with her hand on his arm, not saying anything, watching her daughter with an expression that Lena recognized from years of being watched by her mother. Love worn past the point of needing to announce itself. Mia, at the table where Asher was talking to a colleague, having inserted herself into the conversation not to participate but simply to be near him, the way she arranged herself in proximity to her father with the ease of someone who has always been exactly certain of her place. And Asher himself, who looked up from the conversation at that exact moment and found her across the room with the same ease, the same immediacy that he had always found her. The particular way his attention had always moved in her direction without being directed to. He raised his eyebrow. A question. She shook her head slightly. Nothing. Just looking. He held her gaze for a moment, and the small smile arrived, and she let herself feel the full weight of the moment without managing it. 13 years, and the Sunday mornings, and the joke that was never a joke, and the cowardice on both sides, and the cost of all of it, and also this room, this night, these people, this life she had built with her own scarred hands, and was now building in the direction of something she could finally call by its right name. Ruthie appeared beside the booth, setting down 2 slices of cake that had not been requested. "From me," Ruthie said. She did not elaborate. She started to leave. "Ruthie," Lena said. She stopped. "You knew," Lena said. "From early on. You knew what it was." Ruthie looked at her with the specific expression she had worn for years, the one that contained everything she had chosen not to say. "Anyone who looked," she said simply. "Anyone who looked." She went back to the counter. Asher arrived at the booth 2 minutes later, sliding into the seat across from Lena with his coat gone, his collar slightly open, his expression carrying the particular quality she had now spent months learning to read without the interference of fear. Present, whole, here. He looked at the 2 slices of cake. "Ruthie?" he said. "Ruthie." He picked up a fork. She picked up hers. They ate the cake in the comfortable silence that had never been empty, the silence they had built across hundreds of Sundays, the silence that contained everything they had ever said and everything they hadn't, and the long, difficult, necessary road from one to the other. When Mia was 11, she discovered the full story, not from her father or from Lena, but from Marcus, who told it to her over lunch with the instincts of a natural storyteller, and the poor judgment of a man who had not thought through the implications. Mia came home that evening and sat at the kitchen table with the expression she wore when she was processing something significant. "You waited 13 years, she said to Lena, who was at the counter. "Before you told him." "I did." "That's a long time." "It is." Mia thought about it. "Were you scared?" "Very." "Of what?" Lena turned around, looked at her. Mia was 11 now, with the beginning of the person she was going to be showing up in the geometry of her face, still her father's eyes and her own serious expression, and the gap from the lost tooth long since filled in. She looked like someone who deserved an honest answer. "Of losing the safe version," Lena said. "I had something that felt real. I was afraid that if I asked for the real version, it would break. But it didn't. It didn't." Mia considered this carefully, in the way she considered things that mattered. "So you should have said it earlier." "Yes." "Fear isn't a good reason." "It's a very human reason. It's just not a good one." She thought about this some more. Then, with the particular confidence of someone who has reached a conclusion, "I'm going to say things early, when I'm scared, so I don't wait 13 years." "That's a good plan," Lena said. "I'm going to tell Marcus it was his fault, for waiting." "You can tell Marcus that." "I already texted him." "Of course you did." Mia stood up. "Also," she said, pausing in the doorway. "The joke. The one you used to say to Dad." Lena looked at her. "What about it?" Mia smiled. It was Asher's smile, the one that started in one corner and took its time reaching the rest of the face. "I use it," she said, "when I want my friends to know I'm serious, but I'm not ready to say it straight out yet." She shrugged, small and certain. "It's a good hiding place for true things." She left, her feet on the stairs going up. Lena stood at the counter for a long moment after. The kitchen was warm and familiar and held all the versions of itself. The night of the pancakes, the night of the difficult conversation, the ordinary weekday evenings that had become the substance of a life. Outside, the evening was doing its thing. Asher was not home yet. He would be home at 6, which was 20 minutes from now, and then the three of them would have dinner, and tomorrow would come after that. She thought about Mia's smile, the inheritance of small things, the way a joke could carry a true thing for years, waiting for the moment when both the teller and the listener were finally brave enough to hear it. She thought about what Mia had said. It's a good hiding place for true things. It was. It had been. It had also been, for 13 years, a place where the true thing almost got lost, almost waited too long, almost cost too much, almost became the story of two people who held each other at the distance of a joke for so long that the distance became permanent. Almost. But almost is not the same as did. And the margin between almost and did is where the whole of the real thing lived. The Sunday mornings, and the European butter and the wing that needed 2 hands, and the ring with the snag she had gotten sorted at a jeweler who understood delicate settings, and the drawing on the wall, the 3 figures in front of the diner with the brass bell in yellow crayon, labeled in block letters with a star. U.S. Asher came home at 6, exactly, which was unusual, and she mentioned it, and he said there were no circumstances, and she said that was suspicious, and he said she was impossible, and she agreed. And they made dinner together in the warm kitchen with the radio on low and Mia's footsteps overhead and the ordinary evening settling around them like something that had always been waiting to be this. The burnt coffee was still burnt. The bell above the door still complained. The booth was still in the corner, and they still came to it every Sunday, and she still said the words at the end when he was putting his coat on, the gray coat, which she had accepted as a permanent fixture and made her peace with in the way you make peace with the things that belong to the people you love. Every Sunday. The same words. No longer the safe version, no longer the hiding place, no longer the joke that protected both of them from what they were too afraid to say. Just the truth, spoken in the shape of something familiar by a woman who had learned, expensively, slowly, with the particular stubbornness of someone who has to arrive at things in her own time, that the bravest thing you can do with a true thing is simply say it, out loud, to the person it belongs to, before it's too late.